You're supposed to bring your own pen from home, Vern.
There we go. You got one? No.
I don't need one, thank you. I just write notes to people on.
Ink is getting expensive these days.
What, pens? Oh, heck yeah, heck yeah.
Fill my printer up with it.
Okay, thank you for your patience in waiting while we figured out what was going on with the technical difficulty situation here. This is why we shouldn't rely on electronics so much because, you know, they have problems. All right, so it's my pleasure to call the March 26th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting to order. And I want to thank all my fellow commissioners for being here this evening. It's nice to see all of you again. I think I spend more time with you guys than I do with some of the other friends I have, but I'm in good company.
You
Wait,
bet.
we have, thank you, Bob, I appreciate that. We have one request for public comment for items that are currently not on the agenda. And it's my pleasure to call Carla back up. Come on up, Carla. It's nice to see you again. I wish it was under different circumstances.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Carla Laws, and I am on Roosevelt Street. I am part of the subcommittee of the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association concerning Roosevelt Street and the issues with 523. If you are part of our subcommittee, would you please stand? Anyways, today I was thinking about what I was going to say, and one thing that came important to me looking at my 3 children is, what do I want to teach my kids? What do I want to communicate to my kids? And particularly with this issue of people that have history of sexual abuse towards children running a home of this nature. And one thing I would want to tell my kids is that I fought for what was right and tried to advocate not only for the neighborhood, but for these women. So in any case, I thought of that today, you know, that someone who was, according to the Oregonian and also the chief of police, someone who was a youth pastor at Oregon City Evangelistic Church that had, in Oregonian it says that he had abused her for a year as a youth pastor. He also later admitted, but he wasn't prosecuted for, sodomized her. And that's one of several that are in the house on a regular basis that neighbors see. Any case, I wanted to mention that, and so I want to let you know that no matter what, I can't be morally silent on this issue. Also, I wanted to mention is we have met with our neighborhood association. I tried to honestly give it a chance, but I felt like, and I know for a fact that our due process wasn't honored, which is Universal Building Code 105.1. Technically, in this case, we were hoping that we would have some form of avocation. The chair of the neighborhood association said she didn't know about it at all or was notified ahead of time. Under the agenda itself, we were told that Chief Band was supposed to be there. And in fact, we found out at the last meeting we spoke at, Chief Band knew nothing of it. And we weren't put on the agenda. And we had made prior notice of that a month prior. Marty here in our group had done so. And in any case, it's just a little bit discouraging. So I tried to give it a chance. I tried to ask a few questions on what we should expect from our committee. And one thing that wasn't offered to me that was mentioned is that we could actually have a subcommittee. And I had to request that from the chair for that to even happen. That was a little discouraging to me because, I have faith that, Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association represents the people. And I don't feel, and I asked a few questions that we were offered resources or options in terms of avocation. We weren't on the agenda. We weren't offered solutions. And instead, we had a free on the outside there. We had police he was head of childhood sexual abuse, and he was there for about maybe 30, 40 minutes before we had discussed with Free on the Outside and us as like almost like an informal impromptu, which we weren't prepared for. It was not on the agenda. It was very uncomfortable. And it felt like we were being forced into something without having any prior notification. One of the people had a daughter and did not want to bring her teenage daughter in the room because of the circumstances, because they were sex offenders there, that we were talking about the content. In any case, it was told to us that he was willing to sign a document that he was not going to convert the house to anything different. But we found out at
Carla,
the meeting.
who's the he?
Mike Cross, I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
thank you. And we were found out now it's not only a sobriety house for women, now it's converted into a rescue house for women, and it was referred to as a boarding house. So we're just a little bit disillusioned with the whole thing. The house itself has no security in place, no security system. The only thing it has is 2 motion detector lights. So we are concerned about our safety of our neighborhood, or what processes that there are to protect those women. Since we've met last, we've been starting to have crime more in our neighborhood, and I haven't had any crime since I moved here in May. We had a guy trying to break into a house in foreclosure, and what we've been told by police, that person actually went back into 523, and they shut the door, and the police actually tried to knock on the door, and the door, no one would answer, and they had to give up on it. So we have a lot of concerns here, and the biggest problem for us is the lack of due process, that there's no ramifications in terms of that due process. We've gotten a letter, well, an email from Cross and Mrs. Turway on their dialogue, and it seemed like the dialogue was over and over and over. Mrs. Turway tried to ask specific questions to Cross, and Cross would just answer with his mission over and over on his Free on the Outside, not her specific questions. And then as of last Wednesday, we got a notice from the attorney on their interpretation and why. And, but you know, we argue that interpretation, and we also argue on the fact that our due process has not been honored. So it's a very discouraging time for our neighborhood. We wish that you guys could give us input, but we wanted to let you know where we're at. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I would just like to say briefly, as somebody who has been a neighborhood chair and helped start up some, in fact, I kind of helped regenerate Barkley Hills. It's a completely citizen-driven. I mean, there is a staff person there to assist, but it's just a bunch of people like you trying to make the system work. So don't give up on them. Try to see what you can do to help, or do what some neighborhoods do and take it over.
I'm kind of scared at this point because honestly, our mayor's significant other runs it. And she claimed she didn't know anything about this when we know that the mayor knew about it on February 18th and had talked to the board of Free on the Outside and had advocated it being a sobriety house for women to one person in our neighborhood on their Facebook. The biggest thing for us is we don't feel like we're advocated for, and we actually tried to vote her out. We got an even tie. She was very upset about that.
Well,
And
and that's the downside of when you're trying to run somebody against your neighbor. But what I'm trying to say is, you had a discouraging interaction with the neighborhood association. Don't let that discourage you from being part of the neighborhood
Thank you.
association. It may take time, and some of them go into crazy turmoil, and some of them come out so much stronger and well-trained, because, I'm part of McLaughlin, and currently Chairwoman McGriff is one of the, well, you were a coach
Right.
here.
I've heard good things about your association.
But we took 20 years to learn how to do it right, and to learn how to work, you know, like how do you set up a subcommittee? What does that mean? And all that. So don't check out. Try to work with it, and you know, it might have just been a series of oops, I didn't know. I mean, but don't let one thing ruin your thing. And if nothing else, come to our meeting. I mean, you won't be able to bring your issue to it, but you'll see how a big meeting works and how it runs, and you know, then you can take that skill back. So
Well, and since our last Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association meeting, 2 chairs have stepped down, and one was supposed to head up our subcommittee.
and again, like I said, that's the problem with it being a citizen-driven thing is life gets in the way, or you don't want to have that conflict, so you step out of it. But if everybody checks out, you end up with 3 people who are drinking buddies sitting in the room calling themselves a neighborhood association, and you really don't have, you know, representation. So please don't give up on them. You know, you may want to, you know, I'm not going to come to the next meeting because it upsets me, but don't check out. All of you need to be part of your neighborhood associations, because that's what builds the strength.
Well,
and
and-
builds the leadership to eventually maybe sit up here or on the city commission or whatever. So.
I used to work as the treasurer for my PTA, which was 2 different schools, and one thing I've been told is that our Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association has no 501c3.
Very few of them do.
Wow.
Most of them don't.
Yeah.
Do you have an adopted set of bylaws?
Yes.
Yes, they
Yeah,
do.
Okay.
I've looked through them thoroughly. So part of it was there was a clause in there in terms of conflict of interest. And I actually tried to give it a shot and ask some crucial questions before to make a conclusion whether we were being represented fairly or not, like if we were offered a subcommittee, because I knew that ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you know, sometimes it really is just a citizen who doesn't know, who ran from their job and, oh God, I've got a meeting tonight, and, you know, so please don't check out on them. You know, I'd say check in and be more involved.
Okay,
I've got a question. A little touchy.
sure.
Have you made any effort whatsoever to possibly reach out to these people, to dialogue with them?
Well, we were forced to at the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association. He was there.
Pardon me?
He was there at the Neighborhood Association for Barclay
The
Hills.
person I think that's running,
Yeah, Mike Cross.
or is this, what did you say the name of the organization was again?
His name's Mike Cross.
The organization,
Oh, Free on the Outside.
Free on the Outside.
So they had a lady there who runs the house, and she's there full-time. But neighbors have also seen Mike Cross and other people that have had poor interactions, one claiming that he cannot be around our children there on a daily basis, going in and out of the house. Whether, I don't know, doing some form of duties, but
Now,
yeah.
Who can't be around the children?
One of the guys that was working on the house initially to set up before, what our issue a lot is we can't count on what he says is going to happen. Now, since the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association, it's now a rescue home too for women and children. Not only women, but
Do the
children.
occupants of this facility understand what your concerns are?
No, we haven't been able to talk to them.
Well, this is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Have you reached out to them?
A lot of us feel like it's somewhat unsafe. One of the neighbors had an interaction and had ended up calling the police. And from what the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association, when we met with Mike Cross, the founder of Free on the Outside, he was claiming that he had called the police on her, which that never happened. So at this point, there's been a lot violated in terms of trust, that even though he admitted he was sorry, but since then he's converted it now into this rescue house, we don't have anything to count on in terms of stability. And of course, we feel for these women. I mean, goodness gracious, I mean, they're important too. We would love it to be an Oxford house, since an Oxford house has more rules in terms of help. But in terms of, you know, now it being a women's rescue house and then it being run by a religious organization that has the history it has as people running it, I think it would be pretty hard to do that. And it seems silly to me that it's now converted into basically what he even said word verbatim, a boarding house. a rescue house for women and children. And now it's technically a boarding house. So it seems like the usage of that has changed even in the past few weeks. So.
My thought on that, I was thinking about what Bob said, but with all the contact that Laura Turway's had with him, I would think that they pretty much have the picture of what the neighborhood feels about it. I don't know. Is that true? You've had conversations directly with them, with the people that run this house?
Hi. We have had a lot of conversations. There was a code enforcement complaint, and so we did investigate that code enforcement complaint and came out with a decision, which meant that there wasn't a conditional use needed, which was the code enforcement complaint. I sent you guys the attorney's letter with the language that the neighbors has also got. I can come back at another time. I know that we have a very full agenda, and I can go through all the details. But really, the crux
I
that
was
we're
just
looking
getting at
at.
the point that it's hard for her to go talk to them when you're already talking to them.
So his question was, have you had specific interactions with this, is it Mike Cross?
Mike Cross, she sent us a
Yes.
thread.
You have, okay,
Yeah.
because that was his question.
Yeah,
I have.
yes, it's hard for her to go, but maybe somebody from the city. But the other thing I wanted to add, because all of us have been on our neighborhood associations, we've both been chair of the CIC, is they have steering committees. And it's wise to get involved on the steering committee. If you can't be one of the officers, steering committee decides what's on the agenda.
Okay.
So get involved, and because they hardly ever turn anybody away from a steering committee. They're always looking for volunteers to help. But the more you can get people to come out and say, we'd like to be on the steering committee, because it's not just this issue, there's lots of other issues, but then you'll be in a direct line to help set an agenda.
Yeah.
Well, there is one other issue here that we keep dancing around. And that is, and here's a little testy now. As long as these people are in compliance with the law, they have every right to do and occupy that premises. And as far as I can see, that this whole issue has been confrontational. And as long as it remains confrontational, you're gonna do this. And you're always gonna be afraid that there's gonna be something happening. You're gonna anticipate it to the point where it becomes real. And if you people don't get together somehow and have an understanding as to what your concerns are and what the law requires, it's gonna continue to be confrontational and nothing's gonna get done. Because compliance with the law is compliance with the law.
So Bob, it's a two-way street. I think what I hear from the neighbors is that they would have appreciated the people with this organization contacting them to say, this is what we're gonna do. And instead, they've been getting, from what I understand from not only Carla, but other neighbors, they've been getting sort of the runaround.
Well, yeah, but they're not required by the
No.
law to do that.
But that's a neighborly, courteous thing to do.
Well, this is why I'm asking the reach out factor. If you reach out and start communicating with each other, you see, then you're gonna be standing on common ground. But as long as it's confrontational,
And just real quick, if it's intimidating for you, Clackamas County offers a mediation service.
No, we know that.
Have you, okay.
The problem we're having is, even before, when it was becoming a sobriety house, he had mentioned to a few neighbors, Mike Cross, that I'm becoming a sobriety house, so I don't have to run anything by you anymore, which, you know, technically he legally doesn't. But what the issue is there hasn't been trust from the get-go. And I realize what your point is, sir, and I totally get it. But the problem is we interpret that slightly differently. We've been told, I mean, even though you guys don't, or planning doesn't consider it a facility, we feel that there's a lot of proof that it's a facility. And on top of which, that our due process has not really been honored at 105.1, where we have a universal code that should have been invited in the process. Now, yes, it's not labeled by city planning as a conditional use, but now it's being referred to as a boarding house. So it seems like that use has just changed again.
Yeah.
So as part of this, you might want to advocate for more clarity in the code
Yeah.
for what these things are. And, you know, if you feel like the policy is inadequate, then you might want to create a laundry list of other things that you want to see in the revised code and bring that to the city council or city
Okay.
commission here. I mean, and then that can get passed down to us to work on.
Okay, city council.
That would be the due process there. you see.
Okay.
Christina, who is the staff liaison to the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association?
Pete Windsor. Oh, Pete.
Pete?
Yeah, we got to meet him. He was really nice.
Yes.
So, and he seemed helpful, so.
I would have Pete's number on my speed dial and have communication with him to see what he can do to help you navigate your way through this. Pete.
So the next step would be city council, right?
Well, the next step is to look
Yeah.
at the code, like, because you got the letter from the attorney, and
Right.
here's what the definition of boarding house
And we are
and
in the
facility entails.
subcommittee.
And say, you know, we think he's doing this and this and this, or
This is what
he's
they
doing
told
this, and it doesn't fit in either one of those, but it sounds a lot like.
This.
You know, it's not a boarding house because they're there for 35 days, so.
Well, they
you know-
were fluctuating
Well, no, I'm
between
just saying.
30 and 60, so
I'm
there's
just
no,
saying that, you know,
yeah.
boarding house is defined as 30 days or less. So, so he's keeping there for 35 days. Well, then maybe the code needs to say short-term beyond 60 days or whatever. So, and then you bring that to, you know, the city council, and then they would, if they think there's merit to it, then they would direct us to look at the code, and planning and us would look at it and maybe we change it. Or
Okay.
maybe we compromise to 45 or something. Or maybe we say, no, 30 is a good number, that's what everybody around us has. But that's a way to work at changing it so that, you know, he has to start answering questions.
Okay,
You know, I mean, it's not a guarantee, but that is a way for the process to work. And then it helps, you know, South End neighborhood when they want to put a not care facility out there, you know, or whatever the case may be, so.
well, in Laura's defense, she asked very specific questions, and I saw the email thread, and they weren't directly answered, you know, and what do? Put a knife to someone's throat and tell them to answer these questions the way I want you to? It just doesn't
Yeah,
always happen.
So I think the take-home on this
Wrong
would be
country.
to really develop a clear list of substantive items that you would like to see
Okay.
changed in the code, as opposed to, like, I know that these issues are terrible, and
Thank you.
nobody likes to hear these. I don't like to hear them either.
Right.
But I think the only thing that we can really respond to is policy and whether or not it's adequate or inadequate.
Okay,
So we need a list of things that you feel are inadequate, and then maybe some suggestions as to how to make it better, or you know,
Okay.
for definitions and that kind of thing.
and go to city
So
council
what I
if
would do
we
before we go to
eventually-
city council
yeah.
though, is do
Okay.
a subcommittee and sit down and talk about this
Okay.
and brainstorm on, you know, what that policy would look like.
Okay,
Yeah,
And then we
because
come to
the city council will react much more favorably if you say,
Yeah.
we see a problem and we have this proposed solution.
Yeah.
Versus, there's a problem, fix it.
I really
There's a lot of those in the
appreciate
city.
all your feedback and giving good advice, and I really appreciate it, because otherwise we wouldn't even know where to begin.
Carrie? I've got a question for you in terms of an occupancy permit. If is that required, given the fact that you've got a increased number of people that aren't of the same family residing at that place?
Are we talking about the building code, or are we talking about planning?
No, well, occupancy permit, I guess, would be the building code.
Occupancy permit is a building code
Well,
term.
is it required?
An occupancy permit?
Pardon me?
I don't know, we'd have to ask Bob. Go ahead.
When we did the code enforcement analysis, we looked at it both from the planning as well as the building occupancy perspective, and both of them hinged on if care was being provided. There was no limit on the amount of people and residents when the number was 9. So 9 was okay, in other words, as being a replacement for a single-family home. So in that sense, there was no occupancy. If the number was much, much higher, then there would have been other building code violations that came in through the building code, as well as if there was care that was being provided through our building code as well. I can give you guys a really thorough debrief. I know we have a really full agenda. This is
we
sort of a big
understand that.
topic, and there's a lot of moving
No,
parts to
We
it.
understand that, and we have people here who have concerns.
There are 9 people
Right.
staying there, but technically 10 are, because there's also a full-time person staying there as a house manager too.
Does that house have 9 bedrooms?
No.
Don't need them.
No, I know, but hopefully they're not staying in closets and other places.
Well,
like that.
I heard they were staying in the garage too, from what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, the garage
Yeah.
isn't a bedroom.
No, it's
I don't know,
not.
mine is.
Well, you converted yours legally to a bedroom
Legally?
with exiting and all of that.
And then also,
Yeah,
just to clarify
that's
one
it.
thing, is that the neighborhood associations aren't legal entities of the city as well. And so the city does not coordinate neighborhood associations. They're not city groups.
I was reading on the bylaws that if you basically, you're represented by your association to advocate for you for planning though. Isn't that correct?
That is,
Perhaps that's
that is
correct,
one of the
yeah.
elements of what they do, but it.
That's
it
like in the
isn't- it isn't-
bylaws.
It isn't the only way of doing it.
Right,
They're
okay.
just, the way that we deal with what's called Goal 5. and
Just,
so-
yeah, just to be
yeah.
clear, they're not city organizations, neighborhood associations are not.
Isn't technically someone who volunteers though an official, technically representing the city, because that's
It
what.
depends on what you're doing as a volunteer. They're volunteering to a neighborhood association, which is a group of people who have banded together in order to help advise the city and the people in the neighborhood.
Okay.
It's a weird, I guess, quasi-legal situation, though, because we went through it when we were looking at, with McLaughlin, because we sued the city about something. And so, can we do that, or is that like one department of the city suing us? And no, we are, the neighborhood associations are not an arm of the city. The city does provide staffing because there's technical questions. And they send a police officer because that's part of the community thing, but you won't find a department that says neighborhood associations. There's a liaison, but it's only to help with the, so Laura doesn't get 13 questions every time there's a neighborhood meeting.
To facilitate communication between
Right.
the city and the public and get information back from the
Yeah.
public.
So, but it is not the only way to do it. You just did it by coming here and talking in general, city commission. If you're concerned about how many people are in it, I don't know whether planning did it, but talk to the fire department, say, I think there's too many people based on the fire code.
Okay.
And I don't know if that was part of the
That's with
question.
our building code as well.
Okay, so it was
Well, the
already in.
building code folks looked into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can look at.
Because Clackamas
sitting and
County
all that
runs the
stuff.
fire department now, not. or
No,
is
No,
it-
Clackamas County Fire District, we have a
Okay.
special
They're
district.
their own, they just happen to be called Clackamas. So,
Okay. Yeah, because it's now Clackamas County, not just Orton
You might
City.
look at
Yeah.
exiting, that's a fire code issue.
Yeah, or how many fire alarms there are, or smoke detectors.
There was nothing, as far as we know of,
Well,
other
I'm
than
just
two
saying,
motion lights.
they can
Yeah.
look and it's official, but it might not be public information.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
anyway.
Okay, Carla, thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Okay, bye. All right, we have several public hearings on the agenda tonight. The item 3A is the public hearing portion of this has been closed. We are just going to be considering the adoption of findings, and that is it. So we are not going to be taking any public testimony. We closed the record and everything last week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. Just seems like it was last week, it was so much fun. Does staff want to say anything more about this, other than for us to have a discussion about the findings that we've been presented in the revised staff report that was issued 7 days ago, actually quite a few days ago?
Before we move into that, this is a legislative matter, so there are no quasi-judicial hearing procedures.
not
You
read
don't
them?
have to read them, but just to be clear, there's no conflict of interest that anyone needs to discuss.
We have not had any gentlemen, we have not had any discussion regarding this item since the last meeting, and I'm assuming there are no conflicts of interest. Again, this is not a quasi-judicial land use hearing, so again, I will not be going through the lovely speech, but I will be reading it later, so just wait.
So go ahead.
So let's, staff, do you have anything to add with regard to the findings, or may we go into discussion and then make a motion and do whatever we're going to do?
You may go into discussion. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. We have our revised final findings for you. And
Perfect. All right, guys, where are we on this?
I do have one question.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons we set this back was to make sure that we had the Oregon City Greater Watershed Council's most current
Correct.
report.
Right.
I see that there is a temperature assessment. Is that the most current report? Because.
it is.
Okay, so while he was saying 16 and 17, it was when they were acting on it, but it was or 17 and 18, it was a 16 report, because it was like December 12th or something.
He said it was a 2017 report.
Right.
That's what Doug said.
It just happens to be dated 2016, but that's because it was late December.
Yeah.
So that's when okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything new. So we have all the updated Greater Watershed Council's information.
Yeah. And I had made one comment to staff that before this goes to city commission, in staff reports, if you say see something else, that's not really very helpful, and whatever findings needed to be detailed in that particular section should be detailed in that particular section.
Unless it's a paragraph up or down.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's okay. Even if it's a repeat, just say it. Don't refer to something else, because then I can just see people going back and forth. Any further discussion on this particular item?
One more specific.
Oh, please.
You have the revised report, March 22nd. That's less than 7 days from the day we're acting. Is that okay? And or should it be today's date versus?
There was a report that was posted 7 days ago, and we
Yes.
did receive that comment from Ms. McGriff. So we combined the two findings under one finding and reposted it on that
I
day.
just wanted to make sure it was clear why it says the 22nd. Okay. Right.
Should I make my comments now? or address
Yes,
them
please
both?
make your comments now. That would be
Okay.
great.
Obviously, I've been very vocal about this because of the lack of addressing Redland Road concept, even though it was explained last time by Kelly. And while I don't agree that the Redland Road has been adequately addressed, and I'm very disappointed in that, I can still see the purpose and the intention of this Beaver Creek area. But still, I think that we need to look at the Redland Road a lot more closely, because what expectations are for the future with all the homes that are being built. And right now, everything is slowed down out there on Redland Road with all the construction trucks and new traffic. So I don't think it's adequately addressed, and I'm really concerned about that. But I can see that the need for this up at Beaver Creek.
Can I make a suggestion that we attach a memo to this, this report going to the city commission, and make a suggestion regarding the fact that we'd like to see Redland Road further addressed? I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but they're working on the water line at the Carver Bridge, so that means all
I've seen
roads
that.
coming from there are going to come funneling through only one or two ways. I mean, it is
They come down Bradley.
it's kind of a mess right now. And so Redland, I think, is going to be seeing a little bit of an uptick in some traffic, because there's not too many. Bradley's gonna be messed up, with several other streets.
already is.
So, yeah, well, it already is.
And I think
so.
unless somebody lives out there, they don't understand the concerns
So
of
I think
Park
if people
Place.
are, if commissioners, if you're okay with us making just a small statement after, in a part of our motion, that we would like to recommend to the city commission that Public Works do some further investigation into some of the concerns that were expressed regarding Redland Road.
Can I get some clarification on that? Sorry to interrupt. So alternate mobility standards originally had Beaver Creek in 213 as well as Redland in 213. The whole point of the project was that we didn't believe that there was a feasible solution engineering-wise for those intersections to meet our mobility targets or our acceptable level of congestion. And so we came up with this project. Through the project, we gained more confidence that the $10 million solution that we did have identified for Redland Road would be a good solution, and it was feasible because we gained more confidence about the funding because it's listed on our regional transportation plan. And so there is a solution that is identified for Redland in 213. It is determined as feasible. There's funding sources in other ways where it's likely to be funded through a variety of sources. We are collecting SDCs on that. I'm not sure what other clarification you need.
Personally, I don't think, even if we did put it as something as a note to this, nothing else is going to be done, as it was addressed the last few times. They've let the standards be what they are out there at the intersection of Holcomb and Redland, and they feel that those will be adequate through 2035. And I keep saying, you don't understand how bad it is now, and as we can do all the studies we want, but if you don't live there and see what Redland Road is like and there's been deadly accidents out there because I've written stories on them. And to add this much traffic of 1,400 more homes out there in the future, potential, and all the other development, I know we have this 10,000, we don't have the money to do it, and SDCs, even from those developments, as John Lewis pointed out, and I asked him to reiterate the last time, they don't stay in Park Place. SDCs are spread out all over the city, so there's no guarantee that anything will happen at Redland Road and all that vicinity until after 2035.
Yeah.
Can you say something different than that?
Yeah, so it's on the funded, so it's on our SDC list, which means we collect money for a portion of that project.
A portion.
Ideally, we use that money as a match for other grants as well, because it's on the regional transportation plan, it's on the past one, it's also on this new one going forward as well. There's a lot of confidence that that is reassuring that we can get funding for the $10 million project. It's true, SDCs are a bucket that can go anywhere in the city, but because we're collecting money for a project, we kind of have to do that project. You can't take that money and then never do that project. And it is all within a planning horizon, so there's no guarantee on what year that gets done.
And that's my concern. There's no guarantee because it could be after 2035. Because according to what John said, the roads are fine through 2035. They raise the standards so that they're going to meet them.
So we are proposing not to raise the standard for
Right, so-
Redland Road
Well, they're
anymore.
leaving
We
it
want to keep
1.1, I
it
think, or
at the
something, or-
current standard. We do not want to add more congestion at
That's gonna
Redland and
happen.
213.
Well, and so I think what Tom's asking and what we were looking at for the memo, for your clarification, would be something like,
While we understand.
you know, a year, you know, like proposing maybe having an annual traffic study of the intersection, you know, a count or whatever to determine whether or not the congestion is growing faster than
we
the
anticipate.
the correction horizon. You know, you've got the $10 million potentially set up to happen sometime
Whenever.
you know, but if we can show that congestion is blown past the alternate mobility standard, then we can use that as pressure to accelerate the funding for, you know, from regional partners for grant things saying, you know, development has occurred faster than projected, and instead of doing this in 2023, we need to do it in 2020, and here's the justification we have for it.
Do you mind if I ask Carrie to talk about what happens in the meantime when we have a project in our RTP that we're collecting SDCs on, when development comes in and that development does a transportation study and that transportation study says that congestion at that intersection is full? Could you tell us about what happens
We-
then?
Studies never are accurate.
We kind of already know
Yeah.
that to some effect. I think if we could put something in there along the lines that Damon suggested, he and I can review it, that would be great. I don't think we need to go into any further
Yeah,
detail.
I mean, that annual study might happen because of development, but if you know, it doesn't happen for you know, if no development happens for 2 or 3 years, then it'd still be useful to see if the trending, whether it's because out-county stuff has been diverted because of this Carver thing, or development in, you know, Redland or outside of the city limits is pushing congestion standards higher, even outside of our control. That gives us even more leverage
Justification.
to go to the county and the state and say, you are destroying this intersection, you need to give us money and we need to do it now. I know that I see
They're
the little-
aware.
I understand that, but having numbers versus anecdotes gives us leverage.
Yes.
And
I'm
so-
just hesitant to will away John Lewis's budget and his annual
We're not
study.
willing it away, we're just saying, please keep an eye on this, there are concerns.
And, you know, I don't know how much he can do with just his little, you know, rubber
These little
boxes.
Well, and
You know.
I'll play devil's advocate because we know if there's a development, that's gonna trigger a traffic study. So we know more traffic studies are gonna be happening in the future.
And we know how reliable those are.
I've never seen one I'd like to believe.
So,
Well, we have 2 transportation engineers that do it, right?
But
The
you can't-
cities and the applicants.
I've never seen one I believe, I'm sorry.
you can't advocate for a traffic study and then say that how reliable these traffic studies are.
I'm
You can't
not
have both
advocating for a
sides.
traffic study. I'm just suggesting to address Commissioner Giles' concern that we add a statement to our memorandum to the commission saying that while we understand 1, 2, and 3, we would like to have some additional eyes on what's going on with Redland Road, whether it's inside the city or outside the city that might affect this. And again, I concur with Damon, who's saying things could be accelerating faster than we anticipate. That's all.
And I'm
That's all.
uncomfortable with, we're urgently trying to save money to make this transportation fix. advocating for something that's gonna have a fiscal assignment to
Well,
it.
and for me, I guess what I'm saying is I don't necessarily think that it needs to be a full study, but John has, the little rubber hose counters. And it doesn't cost him anything, well, I mean, time, to put the rubber hose counters up and, do it at the intersection and do it at the city limits of, on Holcomb and see, like last year, the count was, 8,000. And this year, the count is 18,000. That says something. That gives us a data point that, at some point, I'm not saying put the camera there and count how many blue cars go through or anything like that. But I think we need to advocate that it be part of John's rotation, because he's got, I think, 24 of them that he moves around, that he make sure that at least annually Holcomb gets counted, as opposed to, because he's got 120 miles of road. So we just want to make sure that Holcomb gets and Redland Road gets an emphasis on that.
Damon, I'm going to add to what you're just saying here, but I think there's another factor that we're overlooking, and that we've done our due diligence pretty much based on volume. But I think when you start putting a face on this, we better start emphasizing public safety, because the more volume you put on these roads,
Yep.
the more you affect the safety of the driving public. And I'm not going to tolerate that from my standpoint, because I'm not going to lend my vote to it. Sooner or later, we're going to have to come to grips with this thing and quit pushing these numbers up so that they meet the whatever mathematic equation that the state's coming up with. We're going to have to either deny zone changes and density increases to keep that volume down, which relates to public safety. Now, from my standpoint, I'm going to support this. But this will be probably the last time that I will, because we've done our due diligence. I think we've been responsible in it. There's too many other factors involved here that I think the Planning Commission has to responsibly address. And I've always been an advocate of health, safety, and welfare of the public, and that's what a comprehensive plan is all about. That's what zoning is all about. And if it's not, then what are we doing? What are we doing here? We're advocates for the health, safety, and welfare of the public as it relates to land use planning and transportation. So we got to put a face on this, and public safety comes first, in not just volume, but public safety.
So I guess to put text around what the memo or the recommendation would be is, based upon our concerns of the volume of traffic at Redland and 213 and Holcomb, we request the Public Works do annual traffic counts of Holcomb Boulevard. Yeah,
I
period.
thought we were concerned about Redland Road.
Well, Holcomb is what I was addressing. is
Yeah, Holcomb and
coming
Redland, yeah,
down to
Holcomb and
Redland
Redland, Holcomb to Redland, yes,
Because
sorry,
all the
okay.
development that's taken, this will be
Okay.
my final words on it,
Okay,
because I know
that's
we've got
fine.
other things
Yeah.
to do, but we have the airstrip that's being
Yeah.
done, the old Sears Farm area, the new development
Got it.
that is up
Got
for
it.
annexation, it's got 92 acres, and the road's not being finished down, so it's all gonna come onto Holcomb. Holcomb is gonna take the brunt of all that new traffic,
Right.
and that comes down to Redland Road, and that's where Redland, Holcomb, Abernathy, all of them come together
together.
and then go on to 213. And that's been my concern is all along is, what are we doing in that area? Because
Got it.
unless you live there, every time we hear an annexation hearing or anything,
Got
people
it.
out there tell us about the traffic
We've
in the
got it.
area. I know, I want to clarify
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
everybody else does.
Could I make one point on?
When he's done.
Yes.
He's not
I
done.
guess I'm done, I was told.
Go ahead,
No, no,
Yes,
go ahead.
To add to Damon's framework of this memo, I agreed with what you started out there, but then we didn't really finish it off, I don't think, to the point of how often do we want somebody to keep their eye on it? Is it
Well, I
every
did say
6
annually.
months,
He
every
said,
2
he said
years?
annual, he said annually,
Annually?
yes.
To conduct an annual traffic
And the
count.
expectations of that are, I guess it's a
See if it's
question.
growing.
Are we expecting a giant study, or is this
No.
just
He said traffic counts.
a traffic count?
Right.
Which he can do pretty much
Sure.
build into his schedule?
Sure.
Yeah, he's got, I think, 24, if you go on OC Maps, he's got like 24 sites where he's doing counts or he's got them out there. You can actually see them, like, you know.
Ticking away.
Yeah.
With,
so-
with that addition, I would suggest, I would support it to move on and get the ball rolling on the 213 Beaver Creek. And there's no guarantees in that test really, or test that he does annually, but at least somebody is looking at it.
Gives you
Right.
some trend analysis to work
Right.
with.
Trend analysis would be good.
Is that clear?
That's great, guys. Appreciate it. So my only heartburn, his heartburn is Holcomb, Redland, and Abernathy. My heartburn has to do with Holly Lane. And you
And then
guys know that I have
TSP.
expressed my concern regarding Holly Lane because I don't, number one, I did not feel it should be in the TSP. Number two, I think it's got so many problems to try to put, I think what it shows in the plan, a bike lane or some sort of a shoulder on there is going to be completely problematic. I understand everything else. I would support everything else. I do not support the Holly Lane work that's being proposed in this. It just makes absolutely no sense to me, and I would, just as soon Holly Lane stay with the county and let them deal with it.
Well, I would say initially it was a Holly Lane bike lane, but what it's moved to is a roughly parallel to 213 bike lane.
Yeah.
Is-
I
Because it
wouldn't ride a
now,
bicycle on Holly Lane.
it now.
I wouldn't drive on
wanders
Holly Lane.
Through Metro and all that.
No offense to people who live on Holly Lane, and I do know people who live on Holly Lane. It's just an unsafe at any speed.
Can we call for the question?
Yes, please, someone would like to make a motion? So you can put my little caveat in there about concerns about Holly Lane. Holly
Give it a
Lane
shot,
has
Damon, see what you
problems.
come up with.
I'm trying to find the document so I can read the right number. There we go.
L1703?
Yeah,
Yes,
no, I was finding everything but that.
yes, LE 1703.
So, I move approval of LE 1703 legislative amendment for chapter 1204-205 with the added memorandum.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Bob Mahoney. Let's call for the question, and let's have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Guile?
Reluctantly abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
No, I don't think it goes far enough to provide alternative modes. And I don't think it has enough language to discuss the larger projects that are on the horizon and the mechanisms for funding and ways by which we need to get to those. I think Dave McNeil made some good testimony about that. And so I will be voting no.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Chair McGriff?
I am reluctantly, and I will say this,
Commissioner Johnson?
Oh,
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm reading my thing. and it
She's
doesn't
reading her
have-
thing. Commissioner Johnson, how would you like to vote, please?
Yes,
And so I will conclude by saying I am holding my nose. I feel that this is a Band-Aid. This is not a solution. And I really agree with you on the standpoint that, Paul, that doesn't go far enough. And I'm not really thrilled about the Band-Aid.
I'm fine with alternative modes, but I think.
But I am going to hold my nose and I'm going to vote yes, with the caveat that the concern I have about Holly Lane be put into the memo, which Damon and I will review before it goes to City Commission. You will let us know when this is going to go to City Commission.
April 18th?
All right, so the motion carries.
Motion carries.
All right, let's move on. And now for the exciting part.
The continuance?
Yes, that is the exciting part.
Is it being continued?
Yeah, so we have a continuance. So we are not going to be opening any public hearings. We have a continuance of planning file CD 1801, code interpretation to allow structured parking on a pre-existing non-conforming use for Lithia Subaru of Oregon City. I think that says it all. So can we have a motion to continue, please?
I move that we continue PC 18-045.
CD
Didn't I
18.
say PC
No.
Well,
18-0?
PC is the planning file,
File,
so you have to go.
CD 18-01, sorry.
To
Is there
April
a
9th?
second?
To April 9th.
Could you add to April 9th?
To April 9th.
Okay, there's a second by Commissioner Espy on the motion to continue.
To vote?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We could just say aye, and go down the line. So start with Zach. Go ahead, Zach.
Commissioner Guile.
Aye. How did I get first again?
Commissioner Maybe.
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Espy.
Aye.
Commissioner Mahoney.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Chairperson McGriff.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Who says we do not have any fun here?
I do.
Oh, there's always got to be one, isn't there, in the
Well, I raised
group?
my hand too, I just wasn't vocal.
You don't think we have any fun?
Anyway, so.
Okay.
Item number 3C.
Okay, we next have, this was continued once, this is planning file SP 170119 and VR 170018, site plan and design review and a variance for a 24-unit multiple family development at 314 Pleasant Avenue. And now comes the fun part,
Real quick, what was the VR you read?
VR 17001.
1-1.
1-1, I said.
Yeah, you said one.
Okay, all right. So this is a quasi-judicial land use review that we are going to have for item 3C. Let me ask a quick question before I read the stuff. So Judy, you didn't put a number down here, so I don't know which item you're here to testify for.
That is the item.
3C, okay. I just need to write that down because otherwise I don't get to call that. Thank you. Okay, so, yeah, all right. So I have just read the file number that is scheduled tonight for this particular application. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that applies to each applicant's proposal, and the staff has analyzed that criteria, which is contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial land use hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Court, and I get to point to the chart over here on to my right. Anyone wishing to speak has already, I hopefully, filled out a speaker's card, and if you still decide you want to, just give it to Christina or Carlos, and they will hand it up to here. And speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received, and you should fill out your address on the card so that you can let the city know where you live, so we can send you a notification of the final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony by stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. And I said that really slow for a reason. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application, and any written materials received by city staff during the time period in which the public record is open will be placed in that record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order for it to become part of the record. If a person intends to use PowerPoints, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, and other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the record is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision in which you disagree, any issue you may wish to appeal must be raised for consideration of the City Commission or the Land Use Board of Appeals or both. Without raising this issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements of evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with that same sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So we're going to open the record, as I stated, and have any of you visited the site? And do any of you have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statements to declare? I will start with my colleague, Zach.
Nothing to declare, and I'm familiar with the site.
Nothing to declare whatsoever.
Have you visited the site?
I've driven by on the main street, but no, not directly onto that site.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I've driven by the site several times and nothing to declare.
Vern?
Nothing new to declare.
I have been by the site, and I have nothing to declare.
When you said nothing new,
I think we did this disclosure.
but we have to do it again.
A month ago or
Yeah,
something.
we have
So
to
that's
do-
why I said nothing
Yeah, we
new,
have
and I
to-
disclosed
and what we-
nothing. I visited the site.
Okay, so that's what you just need to say, that you visited the site, but you haven't visited since that
Right.
particular time. Okay, Damon?
Nothing, no conflicts, and I have walked the site and looked at it fairly extensively.
Yeah, I have visited the site twice since the previous continuance. I am very familiar with the site, and I don't have any conflicts to declare, but I wanted to state for the record that one of the applicant's staff persons is a family relation, and we have not discussed this in any way, shape, or form, and I haven't seen him since several months and for today. So I have no bias on this regard, with regard to that.
Chair McGriff, that may be for the next application.
Yep. Does anybody have anything to ask us about any of our declarations or site visits that they want to challenge us on or ask us any questions about it? If not, we will move to the public hearing.
There's a question.
Oh, yes, you have a question? Come on up. We're not really, can't talk to you back there, so you have to come up here. I'm sorry.
That's
It is
okay.
kind of freaky in times, so.
I've not been here before,
That's
so I
okay.
don't know what the
I understand.
protocol
That's all
is.
right. Just make sure that the mic is down. Just push that little thing down. There you go. And just tell us your name.
I'm Glenda Gingras,
Hi, Glenda.
and I live at 304 Caulfield Street.
Okay.
And that's my question, when you say you've walked the site or driven the site, did you drive
Are
down?
you asking me personally or any one of these?
Everybody.
Okay, well-
Everybody, really.
Okay, well, I can tell you what I
Because if
did.
you're gonna deal with this, you need to know what you're talking about. Have you driven down Caulfield and around the block?
Yes.
You
Yes,
know
one of
what
my-
Caulfield looks like?
Yes, one of my very dear friends who used to be a staff person here at the City of Oregon City lived on Caulfield Street, just up the street. I visited her many, many, many times. I drove down parked my car at the end of the street at Pearl and walked in and walked the entire site. Like I said, I'm very, very familiar with the site. I declared last meeting that at one point in time, I was doing some consultation for the Soil and Water Conservation District who had owned the site and had asked me about land use planning procedures for Clackamas County, not for Oregon City, but stuff they were going to do for Clackamas County. So I walked over there and I looked at it. Of course, being the tree person, I asked them about all the trees.
Well, not just the trees, but like, we live clear down at the other end of.
Right, so we're not testifying. You're asking us a question about
Okay,
our
that's
site visits.
what I don't know.
So
All
does
right.
anybody else who drove the site or walked to the site have anything they want to talk about to tell her what you did while you were there?
Just for clarification, for when I was there, I drove up Myrtle and parked on Myrtle with a big truck, and that was fun turning around. And walked the site and walked up onto Caulfield, but I didn't go down and around the block. I looked up it and, saw the terrain. Because frankly, before this came, I thought that was all, I didn't know Caulfield existed. I thought it was Pleasant. Because I used to drive Pleasant when too many people were trying to get into Abby's. But that's the extent of it, as I visually saw Caulfield and then walked the site and saw how tiny Myrtle was.
Yeah, I personally drove down Myrtle to the end of the street. I think I parked right in front of 310 Myrtle, and then I walked in from there, and then I drove back around onto Pleasant. Trying to think, what was Kate's address? She either lived at 305 or the one next to
Way
it.
too long ago.
And I drove all the way down Caulfield into Dimick. Like I said, I'm very familiar with that particular site. And then my former babysitter lived on Pleasant Avenue. And then the other babysitter was on Dimick. So I drove that regularly.
You know it better than the
Dimmick.
people in there.
Yeah, Dimick's on, up around the corner.
Yes, but still had to come out onto Caulfield into Pleasant to get to where I needed to go. So, like I said,
Yeah, we
And-
live where Caulfield goes
Right.
around and,
so do you have any objection to what we saw or what we did there?
no,
Okay, then we'll wait for your testimony.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We are ready for the fabulous staff report.
Over here this time. Good evening. Laura Torrey, Community Development Director for the city. We are here again to talk about the planning file SB 17-119 and BR 1711. Here's a screenshot of the application located generally near Caulfield, Pleasant, and Malala Avenue as well. As you can tell on the site, there's not a lot of development there now, but there are some lovely trees, including a heritage tree that exists on site.
Is there another map that shows more than just what you're showing on the subject site? Because I think we've got some concerns about areas beyond that small portion there.
You mean a broader picture?
Yes.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, like that shows Pearl, shows Dimick, and
Not in my presentation.
Not in your presentation.
But I'll take a look in the application, see if we can get some.
okay.
We have an idea.
All right, so we have proposed a 24-unit multifamily development on the site. The site zoned MUC1, which does allow a variety of.
You said we have proposed, but this is not an
I heard that.
application for the city.
The applicant has
Okay,
proposed.
thank you. I didn't think we were doing this.
No, the city is not, the city doesn't do development, really,
We are at your new office.
other than for our own facilities. The applicant has proposed a 24-unit multifamily development on the property. Since we were last here, the subject site and the site plan has been altered. The big change that you'll notice is the access. Last time we were here, the access was solely coming from Myrtle Street, which is at the top of the screen. Now there's no access coming from Myrtle Street. The access will solely be coming from Caulfield Street, as you can see. So the site layout is generally the same. However, the access to the parking lot is what's changed.
Could you highlight where the access on Caulfield?
Sorry, you're not allowed to ask, unfortunately, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to ask questions from the audience until you come up to testify.
So automobile access, at the bottom of the screen is Caulfield Street. So you see on-street parking on Pleasant and Caulfield, and then you can go from Caulfield Street up into the parking lot, and that's the only access into the parking lot. The access from Myrtle is no longer, you would see a landscape barrier there now. On site, we did talk about that heritage tree. There is a designated heritage tree on site pictured above, and this proposal will retain that heritage tree. It's because of the location of the heritage tree, the building got pushed back a little bit from Pleasant Avenue. It's a rather large tree. It's hard to tell on these site plans because it shows up as a little bitty canopy, but it's actually quite a big 39-inch white oak.
It's a beautiful tree.
It's a beautiful tree. I'll just go through quickly the elevations for this project. So here's the Caulfield South elevation, the Pleasant Avenue elevation. This is the Myrtle Street elevation, and then the neighboring elevation as well. So there they are all together. Yeah.
Can you go back one?
Sure.
Would that car be on Caulfield or Pleasant?
That's going to be on Caulfield.
Okay.
So it would be,
No, that's fine. I just wanted.
I'll show you on the screen, on this upper part, it'd be right here.
Hope to
Right.
God they aren't.
There's some grade on that side of the site. We did provide a staff report with recommendations for you that does analyze the applicable code criteria. We believe that with the applicable conditions of approval, that the application does comply with the approval criteria. The big component of this is really the variances. So there's a variance that is generally applied for the building articulation and modulation. So there's three things specifically that the variance includes. One is this first criteria, 1762-057G1. It requires 3 items off a list, and they've proposed 2 of the 3 items off a list. So you could see the variance is for 1 of the following items. And then also there is a variance for 1762-057G2, which requires a 30-foot wide and a 20-foot deep modulation on the north and the south facade, as well as a ground floor height of 13 feet, and that allows for transitions to non-residential uses in the future, and that's under code section 1762-057J. There are variance criteria that we use to analyze these, to see if that they ought to be approved or not. The findings are provided in your report. The applicant provided mitigation for these criteria. So the mitigation is above and beyond what is required in our code. Some of the mitigation includes a large play area. You can see there's structures highlighted in blue. It includes additional landscaping in places where landscaping is not required. Also, there are trees adjacent to the building, so long, narrow trees to help mitigate some of those design. And there are pedestrian amenities as well. There's extra roofing and bench seating and a decorative trellis that are also provided. There are variance criteria, and I am here to answer any questions that you have.
I forgot since the last time we had a meeting, where the new road was in, what was that, just grass before? I can't remember.
The driveway?
The driveway, what was that before? It's been a while, I forgot.
And you mean under the original plan?
Under the original plan, what was that area?
Oh, landscaping.
Just landscaping, so, and it's wide enough for a driveway into the apartments.
It is.
Yeah.
And it complies with our driveway spacing standards and things like that as well. Are there any questions I can answer for you? If not, the applicant has a presentation. They can answer any additional questions.
I just have a question that maybe the applicant can answer if you can't. Since we don't have scale, approximately how far up Caulfield is the driveway?
The applicant can answer that more specifically.
Okay, I mean, it's the length of the building, so but we don't have a scale that says the building is 312 feet or 92 feet or.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I know from here-ish to here-ish is about, so from the property line-ish to about the edge of this driveway is around 25 feet or so.
Okay. I'm just more concerned for sightline to come out that somebody doesn't swoop off of Pleasant and onto Caulfield and ta-da, driveway, car pulling out.
No, but thank you, that brings up a good point. So with this revised design, we did get a new transportation study, which we did a review as well. So you had two engineers, the applicant's engineer, complete a new study to look at these sightlines to make sure that that new accessway was safe, as well as John Ripplinger of Ripplinger and Associates, our city consultant, reviewed that to make sure it was okay.
So I had a question last time for staff about whether there was anything submitted to show proportion and scale in relation to the other buildings that are directly adjacent to this particular development.
The applicant can answer that for you.
Okay. Did you receive anything that was submitted that was even remotely related to that?
Map is she referring to?
We did receive a bundle of new information that we put in the record. I remember talking about it. I can double check and see if it's in there.
We've got this hotel and then
So Laura, the first floor variance, the assumption is that this is gonna be housing and residential and not be used for business purposes in the future.
Yeah, because it's in the mixed-use corridor zone, which we know allows a variety of uses. One of the requirements was supposed to allow the transition to retail easier, but when you have a purpose-built multifamily building, it may not make sense to have that 13-foot floor to ceiling because the building codes are different and it's probably not likely. The applicant did identify that it will have to remain with an income subsidy for 60 years. So you know at least it won't change to commercial in 60 years.
So the likelihood of that is pretty remote then?
That's correct.
I sort of heard your question, but I heard the answer, but I didn't quite hear all your question.
Oh, it was that we're just presuming it's not gonna be used for business purposes in the near future, which is the variance.
And then one last
Part of
thing.
it, yeah.
We did receive public comments today. I placed a copy before you on the record. There's one in the back as well. It's a petition.
the petition. Okay.
We do not believe there's anything in the comments that identified any criteria that weren't already addressed in the staff report.
I didn't see any.
All of the off-street parking requirements have been met in terms of the number of spaces?
Yes.
Why no outdoor living space?
Say that one more time?
I know it's not a requirement, but why no outdoor living space?
Outdoor living
You
space?
mean like a patio or anything?
Yeah.
We don't require, so you could do, in the zoning designation, we don't require outdoor living space that's for only the occupant.
Probably more rhetorical than anything else.
That tree's way bigger than
So no place to
Yeah,
do a
no, that's why
barbecue.
that one drawing has the actual.
There is certainly a lot of common space in this layout,
Yeah, that's
just
awesome.
not personal
Yeah, that's
common
great.
Why
space.
is it blue? Is there water there?
Laura, is there a
Mitigation for that.
adjacent marijuana retail outlet there in this area?
Yep, right across the street.
There's no criteria that lends itself to any distances from marijuana facilities.
There's no criteria for distance between a retail outlet and a residential?
If it has a daycare center in it.
The
Say
city
again?
doesn't,
Daycare.
the city doesn't have any adopted code that says you can't put in multifamily near a marijuana retail facility.
And if it was there first, I mean.
Yeah, it was there first.
There's just no separation requirements. There's separation when you go to place a marijuana facility, but there are no separation requirements. If you're a daycare, there's a separation. If you're not a
Or a
daycare, there's
school
no.
or a park.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could turn that into
But
a
not
park.
house.
Well, I'd like to hear from the applicant.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, Kevin and Nikolai, come on up, please. Please be sure to state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Nikolai Urson. I work for Northwest Housing Alternatives. Here with me today is Kevin Saxton from Casa Architects. He's our project architect. Also in the room, I'd just like to point out that Martha McLennan is our Executive Director for Northwest Housing Alternatives, and we also have Mike Steffen in the back, who works for Walsh Construction. He's our general contractor for the project. So I'm gonna just open it up and talk a little bit about our organization and what our goals are for this project, and then turn it over to Kevin to talk about the specifics of the variance.
Just so you're aware, there is a time limit.
Okay.
So
I
you
will
might.
do my best to
we'd like
move through it fast.
Right. We don't want to spend
So-
most of our time asking Kevin all these
Absolutely.
scintillating questions.
Understood. So Northwest Housing Alternatives has been around for 35 years. We are based out of Milwaukee. It's our mission as a nonprofit to build opportunity through housing. For the last 35 years, we've developed over 2,000 units and served people in 16 counties throughout the state. Our primary resident earns 60% of the median family income or below. So just for context, that's a person, for a single household, that's a person who earns $31,000 per year. Or for a four-person household, that's somebody who's earning $49,000 per year. So we're talking about people who are secretaries, people who are teachers, people who are minimum wage earners, people who live here in Oregon City. So this project is built off of a project that we recently opened up in Washington County called Pomeroy Place, which is a 20-unit project that serves veterans. It opened earlier this year, and it's been churning along. It's been fully occupied and doing really great and serving veteran families in need. This is modeled just like that, except it's 4 units larger. So far, we've received funding from the state of Oregon, from Clackamas County, and from a couple of foundations, including the Federal Home Loan Bank, as well as Meyer Memorial Trust. And I bring that up, the Meyer Memorial Trust thing up, because a component of this grant was to try to deliver housing at a more affordable cost per unit, because there's constrained resources for affordable housing. There's a big need for it, and so they're interested in seeing how we can deliver housing at a lower cost per unit. And so in our effort, we produced housing a design that was a lot more simplistic, however elegant, unadorned, except that it did things like reduce material waste. It produced efficient apartment layouts for different furniture layouts. And it was built to last because we have a 60-year regulatory period required by our state funder. We submitted this to the city and found that it would not make it through Oregon City Design Code because of various design codes that you guys have, and so we worked with staff to try to come up with something that better fit with the intent of your code, and that's what's here before you today. With that, I'll turn it over to Kevin to talk about the variances, but I'd just like you to keep in mind that, now we have funding in place for this. It's a fixed amount. And so as we talk about ways to modify it, we're gonna have to figure out how to do that with the limited amount of budget that we have. And then also with regard to delay, as we are kicking this down and trying to get this through the planning process, we're also gonna be working on construction documents to try to break ground as soon as possible. And whatever delay happens is going to leave people out on the street for longer. Veterans who have served their country and who hopefully can come home to a place that is safe and stable. So with that, Kevin, please.
All right, I'm Kevin Saxton, and does the clock restart, or do I have to share the minutes? Okay, because I've got 26 slides. I'll try to go through them as quickly and carefully as I can. But I wanted to start off by just walking through the constraints of the site. We have a site that's slightly under 1 acre, but there's quite a few constraints on the site that really limits what we can do with it. We have to provide dedications on both Caulfield and Pleasant Avenue. So nothing can be built there. The dedications are for the purpose of building the right-of-way improvements that we need to do on both streets. There is an existing water easement on the west side and the north side of the site. In addition to that, we need to provide a new public utility easement 10 feet wide on both frontages. Laura touched briefly on the white oak tree that we're trying to preserve on the east side of the site along Pleasant Avenue.
Trying to.
And we have 18 feet of grade across the site, so that's a lot of grade to deal with on a fairly small site. And what we end up with is 139 feet 6 of depth to work with. And in that space, we want to place our building. We need to place it along one of the frontages. The white oak, preserving the white oak sort of prevents us from putting anything along the frontage on Pleasant Avenue in terms of building. So our building faces Caulfield. We need parking, which we need to put in back of the building to meet the code requirements. And we need to think about having an accessible entry. And with that much grade, it becomes a challenge. But the sweet spot for us is right at 413. That allows us to bring an accessible entrance off of Caulfield Street. And it allows us to have an accessible entrance to our parking lot where our accessibility, where our accessible space is. But the challenge with that, of course, is that our driveway access is at the west end of the site. And it's at 420, so we've got quite a bit of grade to come down to where we need to be for our parking lot. In addition to that, we need to have space for landscaping around and in the parking lot and between the parking lot and driveway and building, and so that's what these green areas are here. We also need to accommodate stormwater, and I'll talk about that here in the next couple of slides, but the ideal spot for that is the northeast corner of the site. And so that's how we end up with the layout that we're at, trying to preserve some of the features on the site and deal with the features of the site. I want to talk a little bit about stormwater. I think there were some comments about some of the stormwater that's existing on site. And what we've done is we've designed a stormwater rain garden, which is in the northeast corner of the site. It's an ideal spot for it because it's the low end of the site. So it's naturally where water wants to flow to. We've actually made the pond more than double the size that it needs to be. The stormwater, the rain garden will collect rainwater from the roof as well as rainwater from all our impervious areas, so our parking lot and our walkways. And we've made it larger than we need to, in part to help alleviate some of the problems that are in the existing public utility storm system downstream, far from our site. We're collecting more water than we need to and releasing it at a slower rate than pre-development. In other words, less water, there's a lower rate of water flow off the site than there currently is after we develop this. We're also adding some rain gardens on Caulfield and Pleasant Avenue. That's the little rectangles here and here.
Well, we can't see that.
Right here is the one for Caulfield, and this is the one for Pleasant Avenue. So as water flows down Caulfield, it will flow into the rain garden and collect there. And as stormwater flows off Pleasant, it'll collect in the other one. There were some comments about trees, and so I wanted to just quickly go through the trees that we're saving and the trees that we are cutting down. The ones that are labeled in green are the ones that we're saving. So there's the white oak, the heritage tree along Pleasant Avenue. There's a tall western red cedar on the north side of the site that we are keeping. There, we are getting rid of all the invasive species. So we're cutting down the sweet cherries, we're cutting down the English holly and the mountain ash that are along Caulfield. We're also cutting down the the remnant fruit trees that are on site. There's a couple of apple trees and a fruiting plum tree. There's a Doug fir along Pleasant Avenue and a small western red cedar. And unfortunately, they have a root zone that is right where the new public improvements need to go. So unfortunately, those need to come down. And then there's two western red cedars in the middle of the site that are also right where the building and parking lot need to go.
So which ones are getting saved again? Because again,
The two green ones.
The green ones are being saved and the red ones are coming down.
so 2 trees.
2 trees that we're saving. We are proposing a lot of trees on site to mitigate the trees that we're cutting down. And as was mentioned earlier, this site will be here for a long time and those trees will be here for a long time as well. So I wanted to go through the variances that we're requesting. The first one has to do with building articulation and modulation. And the intent of the requirement is to create compatibility with the surrounding area. And the specific requirement is that we have a building modulation that is 36 inches deep and at least 4 feet wide if tied to a change in material and color. And what we're asking for is a 2 feet deep modulation. Our modulations are wider than 4 feet, and we do have a change in color and material. So what we've done is we've popped out these white portions. They have a smooth panel siding. So they transition from fiber cement lap siding that's painted a dark gray, and then it transitions to a smooth panel that's an off-white color. And so these white portions are bumped out 2 feet. And the reason we've requested 2 feet is that our building is designed on a 2-foot module. And a 2-foot module works well with construction because most materials come in increments of 2 feet. So plywood comes in 4 feet. Sheetrock for the interior comes in 4 feet. And so everything in the building works on a 2-foot module. And our modulations are 2 feet deep. And 2 feet is deep enough that it's intentional, it looks deliberate, and it's enough of a module, enough depth to give articulation to the building. What we're proposing to help augment that is landscaping. And so one of the landscaping features that we're proposing is the Italian cypress, which are these tall trees that you see in between the white parts. And so here's an actual photo of the Italian cypress. They're a nice, tall, slender tree. So they won't block windows, and they'll provide a nice rhythm and reinforce the rhythm that we have set up with the projected elements on the building. One thing that doesn't show up well in the rendering is the landscaping that we're proposing in front of the building. So we've proposed quite a bit of landscaping in front of the building to help soften the transition from the street to the building and help emphasize the depth that is created by the articulations. So on the right here are those plantings in front that you see here on the landscape plan. You can see these are the shrubs. The spidery looking things in the middle are the Italian cypress, and then there's ground cover in front. So that's our first variance that we're requesting. Our second variance has to do with building length, and Commissioner maybe asked how far back Caulfield is. Well, our building is 158 feet long, so it's roughly 165-ish feet from the intersection is where our driveway is. But our building is longer than 120 feet, so the code requires that we have a modulation that's 30 feet wide and 20 feet deep. And we feel we just really don't have the space on site to accommodate that without losing units. And so what we've done is we've tried to mitigate that with some pedestrian amenities and some features to the exterior of the building. The intent of this requirement is to help break up long lengths of building. And so what we've proposed to do that is at the front of the building, we're proposing a trellis that's a pedestrian feature. So it will have benches and landscaping around it. And it's really a place where residents and neighbors can gather and talk, have a conversation. It provides a focal point of activity, in front of the building. And so here's a little rendering of that trellis. It's a steel and wood trellis that we're proposing. And
Could you point to that again?
We don't see the pointer
Oh,
on
right,
the
sorry.
screen.
We have to
So
turn
that's
all the
why
way
we have to
around.
keep turning around, because we don't know what you're pointing at.
so that's the trellis. And on the plan, it's right here in front of the building. So it's at the entrance of the building. So it helps break up the mass of the building to less than 120 feet wide. And it provides a visual interest, which is one of the requirements of the modulation section in the code. We're doing something similar in the back, where we have a community space at the back of the building. And what we're proposing is a porch, a covered porch. And similar to the trellis, it has built-in seating, so it's a place where people can gather. It provides a transition from the indoor community space to the outdoor patio and the play area.
Is it covered?
It's covered, it's roofed, and so I should have put the color rendering in here. But this is the roof right here, and then there's a bench. So it does help break up the mass of that building, helps break up the length, provides a visual focal point for the building. That's what we've proposed on both sides of the building in order to meet the intent of the modulation.
And there's no color rendering of that?
Sorry, I don't have a color rendering of that. Our last variance has to do with ground floor height. And this requires that we have a 13-foot ground floor height. We're asking that we keep that at 8 feet. Commissioner McGriff, you had asked about compatibility, and I want to talk about that a little bit here with this slide. We recognize that our site here is really a gateway to this neighborhood. As you come off of Molalla, which is a busy commercial street, and you come into the neighborhood, this really provides a gateway and a transition from the commercial buildings into the residential. And so we feel that keeping an 8-foot ground floor height is important for compatibility with the surrounding homes. This is the home across from our site. This is the home to the north of it on Molalla. And then these are some of the homes up Caulfield. And so we feel that 8 feet is consistent with the neighborhood. It keeps our building lower relative to the other homes, and I think it really helps with compatibility.
So do you have this showing the building and an outline of these other houses? Because I can't really visualize how this looks next to your building.
I don't, I have the rendering.
Could you go back to that slide where it showed it with all the others?
This one?
The other one, back. Right there, yes, I wanted to look at that.
So one thing that I'd like to point out, if I can go back to the rendering here, is that the other nice thing about putting our entrance here at 413 is that we're keeping the building at one level. And so as you go up Caulfield, the building actually gets shorter relative to the street and the other homes. And I think that provides a really good transition from Molalla, where you have taller buildings, and then you come off onto Pleasant Avenue and you see the full height of the 2-story building. And as you go up Caulfield, the building gets shorter. It showed up well in that one elevation that was in Laura's presentation. That's all I have, if there's any questions.
Can you go back to the larger floor plan picture? There, that's fine. The units that are facing Caulfield, from your picture and from the diagram, look like they have sliding glass doors?
They are actually just large windows. They're a 4-by-6 window.
Okay, because it's just enough of an angle on your colored picture of it that I wasn't sure. Because if they were sliding glass doors, there is no way in the world those aren't gonna become paths up to the parking spots where people are parking. And you're
Right.
just, you just can write off your landscape plan.
Right.
But if they're solid glass and they're not openable, except, case of fire, we can throw a chair through it and get out. Who cares? It's a fire. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that those weren't sliding glass doors that, at that point, especially the ones that are, your picture shows a nice level, from the top to the bottom, you don't see the almost 6-foot articulation between where the bottom of the window would be and the sidewalk. So that poor person at the end one is gonna have less view than everybody else, but I also like the way you laid it out, so that's bedrooms, so who cares, you're asleep. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was not just sliding glass doors. Thank you.
Any other questions, Zach?
Question for you, and maybe Laura might know. Are you taking advantage of the parking requirement discount because you're on the Malala?
We aren't. We are actually, we're counting our on-street parking as part of our parking. So we're allowed to count a certain portion of our parking that's on-street as our required parking. I forget the numbers right now. I think we're required to have 31 total. And I think we have, do you remember the numbers?
Yeah, but there is no reduction for being on Malala that they're utilizing.
Right.
So there's no reductions, that they're using just the
That they're
on-street.
taking advantage of. Got it.
Whoever wants to go next, please feel free.
Got a question. Denise?
I said whoever wants to go next, please feel free.
Okay. On the parking, at night, coming into those spaces, have you given any consideration to shielding neighboring properties from headlights and things of that nature for nighttime traffic?
Yeah, we have buffering landscaping. I didn't include a landscape plan here, but we have on the north side of the site here, as well as the west side, we have trees and shrubs that will grow to, I think the requirement is a minimum of 3 feet or 3.5 feet, 4 feet. So they'll grow up to 4 feet tall.
Well, that north side there is going to shine right into those homes on Myrtle Street at about 10 o'clock at night,
Is there
And
fencing proposed?
So I'm just wondering if there's any way that you can add some more buffer there to protect against those lights, because they will be kind of a nuisance, a visual nuisance type thing. And that'd be one way to protect Myrtle Street from some of the impact of this development, would be to
Okay, yeah.
shield them from that.
Is there a fence proposed along the rear, the property line facing?
We're not
Myrtle?
proposing the fence, but I think that's something that we can put in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, part of looking at the map, to the left side, part of your shielding is that you've got, your parking lot is dug down. So, but it's the people to the right where they're coming around the corner and catching them and then pulling in. So if you were going to adjust a couple bushes or whatever, I would be concerned with that side more than the other side, but yeah, it's a good point. And I didn't see anything about lighting of the parking lot.
Yeah, I believe in our application, we have a lighting plan that shows the lighting levels. We are proposing parking lot lighting in the lot.
Well, and I guess, is there a pole or is it just gonna be building front facing down?
There is a pole. We are proposing a pole in this location.
Okay. Where there is a
Facing
tree.
the building, and we've selected a light fixture we've carefully selected a light fixture so that we're not dumping light onto Myrtle Street and the adjacent properties.
Okay.
Do you have a plan that shows without the little insert in there? Because I'm trying to see what's happening along the back property line with the
You
site.
just have-
Yep, That, there we go, okay, with the little
Oh,
thing.
there, okay, there's utility,
Yeah.
oh, that's utility easement.
Yeah, the light pole will end up being in this island right here,
Where you have a tree.
where we have a tree. That tree that we're proposing is a dogwood, so it's a shorter tree.
One thing I got right as you started, the heritage tree that we are trying to protect. And I see that this green area overlaps the building. I mean, when you said trying to, does that mean that you're not sure, or?
No, we've designed the building. We're, if I can back up to this, the circle around the tree right here is the root zone of the tree. And this bigger line right here is the drip line of the tree. And we're allowed to encroach a small amount into the drip line, and we're not anywhere near the limits of what we're allowed to do there. And we've kept the building 2.5 feet back, the face of the building 2.5 feet back from the root zone. And we've done that so that we can actually excavate for our footing. So we're as close as we can possibly get to that tree right now. And the reason we had to do that was to make our driveway work
Right.
here on the west side with the water
So the
easement.
drip line overlaps the building.
Drip line, yes. I think we're allowed 18% encroachment into the drip line, but no encroachment into the roots.
Branches down to get that up above your building or something.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for protecting the tree during construction?
Good one.
So we've
Atta
engaged,
girl, Denise.
we've engaged an arborist in this project who helped identify all the trees on site, and we'll continue to work with this person throughout the construction to ensure that the tree is indeed preserved.
So how is the tree going to be protected during construction?
So there'll be a fence put up around delineating the root zone so that no activity occurs within
Will that
that
be a
area.
6-foot chain link fence with signs on it saying, don't store any materials inside of the, great, that'd be good.
Yeah, sure.
The last guy that gets the word is the D8 cat driver. He's the one out there with
Well,
a,
I drive by this several times a day, literally. I will be looking at this on a regular basis. That's why I'm asking the question.
So our code requirements, including fencing with signage, and then we also make sure that it's on the grading plans
Well,
as well.
not just one of those wimpy orange fences that you see, because that's not,
why-
again, this is a heritage tree, and I think we all want to make sure that it survives. And I concur with Bob, the last guy that gets the word is the D8 cat driver.
So back to articulation real quick. You mentioned the 2-foot modular being more economical in terms of cutting material and that kind of thing. Have you guys estimated any kind of cost, given a cost estimate as to what it would be if you were to comply versus not complying? Do you have a ballpark figure of what that would be? What the financial impacts would be of us not approving these variances for building articulation tonight?
I don't have a ballpark estimate on that. I do know that with the
I mean, this looks like a pretty standardized plan. You know, it looks like you guys have it's pretty kind of off-the-shelf sort of plan that's probably all pretty predisposed. You probably have a pretty good idea of how much that would be, I would think.
Neither of us are building estimators, but beyond just the cost, there's also the environmental costs for all the material waste that would take place by just putting an additional foot onto that articulation. So if that's worth considering, I'd put that out there as well.
Okay. And
along those same lines with Paul's statement, this is a pretty prominent piece of property on a pretty prominent boulevard in the city. That's going to be a pretty good sized building. And, how it looks and how it's articulated with landscaping and what have you is going to affect that boulevard for years to come. So we got to get it right.
Go ahead, Paul.
a question to staff. I don't think we've approved any variances for articulation of other buildings in the area, have we?
The fire department, the fire station had variances for articulation.
Okay.
And modulation, very similar.
Yeah, but it was not, that's a really different type of building than this. But I know your question was, have we approved? Yes, we did for the fire station, but the fire station had very site-specific requirements. This does not have fire trucks coming in and out of
Some
it.
roundabout way, I'm just trying to see if they're being denied a right commonly enjoyed by others, but, you know.
No.
Well, in the hotel, the Abernathy Hotel had a articulation.
Again, not residential.
A hotel isn't a place where people stay?
It's not a residential development.
Oh, you're talking about the hotel down?
Yeah,
on
we're talking about
Chapel.
Abernathy Hotel, yeah.
So,
Okay.
Vern, do you have any questions at this time?
No, I might go back and touch briefly on the light glare from cars going in and out and over bumps and the wall or the fence or cedar fence that might, you know, and then you look at the elevation difference from where a car is. A 4-foot cedar fence might be adequate to catch the light. I don't know if it needs to go to 6 foot, but look at that partitioning off the back.
I expect that we'll have a fence in the rear of the property. I didn't know that that wasn't in the drawing, but that will definitely be something that we add.
Yeah, and I don't think a chain link fence is.
No,
Chain
cut it.
doesn't
no,
do
no, it'd
much
be a
for
No,
lights.
and even putting slats in it doesn't do
it's
anything.
just talking about.
Did you have something else, Paul? Go right ahead.
Yeah, detention pond, are you gonna have a 2-to-1, it looks like a 2-to-1 slope, 3-to-1? Something like that, is that gonna go all the way around the pond, or is there gonna be a big wall on one side that, I mean, that's allowed by our stormwater standards, but I'm just looking at it from a design standpoint. If you're gonna-
Right, it's a 3-to-1 on the side slopes,
Yeah.
and it works within the existing grading on the north side here, so we won't have a wall on the north side.
Okay. Okay, so that'll just be kind of the same, you'll just feather it out, create a little slope on that side, or?
Yeah, basically, it'll look like, you know, the grade will go up here on the sides of the rain garden and then back down.
Uh-huh. And then the areas that you have the broken lines over on the west side of the property, those are areas of retaining walls?
Right, these thick dashed lines here are retaining walls,
And
so.
how high will the retaining walls be?
Our largest retaining wall is actually right in this area. We're close to 6 feet tall, and then it tapers down to basically a foot at the end. We've worked with the grade here to keep this wall. I think the maximum height is 2 feet, so this is just a small retaining wall on this side.
And what kind of material?
These will be built out of, and my mind went blank, just a block retaining wall.
Precast that you set in place and just put them
The concrete masonry type, the sort of the wedge shape type with texture on them.
Are they gonna be, what do you call it, are they gonna be mortared in, or are they just gonna be stacked?
I don't have a design for them yet, so I don't know.
Okay, what I'm getting at is that, you know, sometimes those modular blocks get stacked and the water seeps through them and they look like hell after a while. And I'm just hoping that, you know, there's enough money in the budget. I don't know if there is, and I don't know if we can require it, but, you know, to have a more attractive wall with weep holes on the bottom so that the water gets transferred to the bottom of it instead of bleeding out the side of the walls after 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a 60-year-long
It's a
retaining wall.
Yeah, it's a small
Yeah.
small detail, but.
$20 a
a
mortar
noticeable
today
one.
may save you $2,000
$20
worth
later,
of.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this from the standpoint of the fact that it's a residential development, it's an apartment complex, and I will say that the applicant basically has no bearing in my deliberation or my decision regarding this. So talk to me a little bit about this site and why you chose this site, because I am assuming that before you decided to buy this site, you looked into what the City of Oregon City's requirements were, and you talked a lot about the constraints of the site. So what was attractive about the site? Because obviously what I'm getting at is that you knew that there were some constraints. So tell me about what was compelling about purchasing this site.
So the purchase of this property happened before I came on to Northwest Housing Alternatives, but I'll try to speak to that a little bit. I think that the main driver for us seeking this property out was because we wanted to replicate this model that we produced in Washington County to serve veteran families. And we were looking to go into this in partnership with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. So there's a good proximity to their offices, being between the Red Soils offices and their other offices in Oregon City. And so I think that was one of the main purposes of purchasing this site. And also it was sold by the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. And so it was a party with which we were familiar. We did explore, all the other site constraints on it, but I think a lot of it sort of was uncovered through the process of working with the planning staff. A lot of these constraints weren't all the way known until after meeting with Public Works and understanding how much was required in terms of dedications and easements and things like that.
And that was while you were in the process of purchasing it, or?
This was after we purchased it.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit, Kevin, about the materials. I've made some comments in the past, and I'll just be frank about it. Gray. Oregon is gray 99.9% of the time. So we have a gray building, and we have a gray sky, and we have gray everything. And so I think I'd mentioned when you were here last time, talk to me about the materials. I didn't see a materials board. I was going back through the application again to see how they were listed. I don't know what you're proposing to use.
Yeah, and I apologize. I have a wonderful stack of materials that are sitting on my desk that I just forgot to bring with me. I realized that as soon as I walked in here. But the materials that we're proposing, I'm going to back up to the rendering here. The main material is fiber cement lap siding with a 7-inch exposure. It's a very common material that you see on most residences. The panel is also a fiber cement panel, so like a hardy plank, hardy panel. Smooth, we're using smooth panel and smooth plank. We've chosen gray because I think it really helps to.
Doesn't show dirt.
It doesn't show, well, really the main reason we did it is because it really emphasizes where we're changing color. So having a pop of color at the windows and really emphasizing our projections from the building, it provides a lot of good contrast with what we're doing with the other colors.
And white shows everything. And that's a particularly heavily traveled street, so the white's not going to stay white very long. It's going to look, I've said this before because it's true, it gets dirty. And what are the windows made out of?
The windows will be vinyl windows.
Even with the off-gassing that they cause and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we're looking at using a really good quality vinyl window, VPI. They make a great window that lasts for a long time.
Okay, and then my last question, or at least in this part, has to do with just taking a breath, the proposed mitigation of the cypress trees instead of modulation. I'm not getting that. I don't know, they kind of cypress seems more like a bush to me as opposed to a tree, but.
They get quite tall.
Yeah, I know, they're very tall and skinny. They look a lot like arborvitae, which is one of my very, very favorite plant materials.
That was sarcasm, just for.
I thought you didn't like it. I thought you didn't like it. It said it's your favorite.
They are my favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The chop down.
Mix up.
Yeah, they just have a tendency to just look bad after. So I did do some research on cypress. I looked it up.
The Italians aren't too bad.
So the 2 feet, we're trying to work within the constraints of the site and the depth of the site that we have to work with, fitting in our parking lot and the landscaping that were required, as well as the public utility easements. So primarily, that's where, that was where that initially came from, was that we're just right up against those constraints. But 2 feet, 2 feet is a great building module, and we've tried to work off of a building module of 2 feet for economy and trying to get to we're truly trying to make the most out of the dollars that we have to provide the most housing that we can. And so 2 feet works well with the building module. It's an economical one, but I think 2 feet really, like I said, I think 2 feet is a width, and you can kind of see it in the rendering that really looks deliberate. I don't, my feeling is that 3 feet would push it out more, but I don't know that we really get that much more out of it. So I think the 2 feet looks deliberate, and when people see it, they'll see, when they see the articulation of the building, I think 2 feet is not going to look odd or insufficient.
Okay, but see, other people who are coming in for development are going to have to meet that same requirement. And I'm concerned about setting a precedent for something that is pretty standard and that we expect other people, other developers, and you guys are a developer, just like everybody else. So again, why is this an exception? It sounds like what you're telling me is that it's a financial hardship, and that's not our problem. I know that's not one of the criteria anymore, but if it's a financing thing, I don't have any control over that. I mean, the standard is the standard, and you're saying that 2 feet looks better than 3 feet, and I don't see that as part of the standard for meeting a variance for that particular statement, for that particular part of the application. So that's, I'm trying to get you to tell me why this meets the criteria.
Well, I mean, we've had discussions of what hardship is. It's not defined in the code. The intent of the articulation was to provide compatibility with the surrounding area, and from our perspective, we felt like we could do that. We could do that with 2 feet instead of 3 feet, and offset that, have some enhanced vegetation in front of the building.
Okay, so
I guess, I mean, I don't know how to answer that.
You're not understanding what I'm saying. So it says that the request is the minimum that would alleviate the hardship. Granting the variance would equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation being modified. Any impacts resulting can be mitigated, and there are no practical alternatives that have been identified which would accomplish the same purpose and not require a variance. So has to be all of them. Can't just be 2 or 3, has to be all of them. So that's what I'm listening for that in your statements to see how it meets that. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, I guess I don't know how to answer that.
It's a planning wonky thing. I apologize. Again, you have to meet all of the standards, and I'm trying to find from you how, that's why I was making notes on your application. How does that request that you're making meet all 5 of these? Excuse me, 1, 2, 3, all 5 of these. And I can see some of them being met, but I can't see all of them being met. So I'm looking to you to help me make that leap. Variances are exceptions, they're not the rule. That's what I said.
Right.
Everybody else who comes in to develop is gonna have to meet these standards. So why is this the exception and not the rule? That's what I'm trying to understand.
As I understand it, it becomes sort of a subjective decision for you guys to make, and we are trying to meet the intent of your code, hoping that you'll look at this subjectively, knowing that you can, in the future, look at future planning, future proposals subjectively in the same manner. So I would say that, I don't know that this would set a precedent. I think it would take into consideration all of the site constraints we've explained, as well as all of the different mitigating factors that we incorporate into the plan.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the site constraints are under your control. They're not under our control. You knew that when you guys bought it. That's where I'm getting at. So, I'll tell you what, I'll ponder it some more, and we'll go for public testimony and see what everybody else has to say, and we'll come back to it. But I appreciate your trying to get me there.
Yeah, thanks.
And I would like to say thank you for going away from Myrtle.
Yes.
That was just going to be a huge.
Deal breaker.
You know, well, just, like I said, trying to turn around my truck and it, two different driveways I had to pull into, so.
No,
thank you for-
understanding the comments that we received in the last one, we tried to take into account the concerns of the neighbors and redesigned it to that effect, so, yeah.
That was a good move.
You need a smaller car, Damon.
A small, yeah, there you go.
But then I can't do the man thing with my truck and the busted muffler.
Talk them into an electric car, Zach.
You get me an electric Dodge Ram 1500 and I'll definitely drive it.
Okay, we're working on that. That's on my next project. All right, so we have Martha Clennon and Paul Edgar.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just wanted to, Martha McLennan.
Thank you.
Executive Director of Northwest Housing Alternatives. I just wanted to make myself available to answer any questions. Staff suggested that I do that by completing a comment card. So I don't have any additional testimony to offer at this point, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to try to address them.
Nope. Nope.
Hi, I'm Paul Edgar, live in Oregon City. Just to give you a little point, I am on multiple Veterans Advisory, Clackamas County Veterans Advisory Committee, and an advocate and on board of a nonprofit, Fort Kennedy, trying to arrive at solutions for homeless veterans or veterans in need. This is really needed, and I really applaud Northwest Housing and Clackamas County and everybody. One of the key elements here, though, is that the funding sources here eliminate any possibility of that first floor needing 13 feet height. It just can't be. That's the way the funding comes in from the state. It's dedicated for this purpose. It can't happen. So anyway, the next of the variances that I'd like to talk about a little bit about is the articulation, the modulation of it. And in the view of what you're seeing, if I'm on either Caulfield or Pleasant or looking down through the difference between 2 or 3 feet is not going to be visually something that somebody could discern one for the other. And so if I put more planters and other things out there, I can change the view of a lot of eyes there in a lot of ways. And so I just don't even believe that should really be a standard. I think it's something that you have a lot of ability to come up with some degree of variance on that and acceptability of it. The other thing is the length process. Here you got one structure. This again is a situation, when we're fighting, and I hate to use this word, and they bought the property, and it's not my fight or something like this, other than my fight is that when we're trying to arrive at money for any of these projects with nonprofits, that money is awful hard to come by. It is. I mean, you're saying, who are you going to take it from? What needy projects that are out there? And whenever we're trying to do a project, like when I've been working feverishly on some ideas of coming up with tiny houses that we could build for very inexpensive amount. The whole idea is I don't want to see us reaching into the trough for more money when that money is so hard for everyone. And so this is a case where this is an extremely efficient design. You do a little bit of this modulation on it, you change colors, you put plantings around it, and you're trying to do something that satisfies a critical need. And you've got good people here that are going to do everything that you ask to try to make it work good, and Clackamas County is going to be actually running the show, Clackamas Housing. So after it's finished and people start moving in. So I think that this is a good neighbor facility that's being proposed, or I wouldn't even be up here. I wouldn't be putting my real estate into this fight. So I hope that you all arrive at a favorable opinion and approve it. Thank you. If anybody has any question?
I know the timer isn't on, but you are out of time.
I've got a question for Paul. Clackamas County is going to be in charge of this, you say?
They'll be the operator, is that correct? Martha? Yes.
Okay, what about maintenance of the site, ongoing maintenance of it, to maintain the integrity of the site? Are they responsible for that? I presume they are.
They will be responsible for that, and the property will be inspected periodically by the funding partners.
So the maintenance be an ongoing, regular
Yes.
scheduled thing?
Yes.
And the location is really ideal for a lot of people. You're not going to have a lot of traffic too, because a lot of these people are not, they don't have money for cars. This is, they don't, you're not going to, this is in a kind of a transit area, and you're going to try to be able to get, go right up the street. I don't know, it was what, 4 blocks to a pretty good sized grocery store. So, and you know, this is, it's, and right across the streets, also these other higher, taller, bigger retail buildings and stuff like this. So it fits, you know, everything is within reason.
Okay, Paul, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Amy Kama, is it Kama? And Chris Fleck? Did I get that right? Kama, okay.
Thanks for waiting.
Hi, I'm Amy Kama. I live in Oregon City and actually live on Dimmick Street, which is, so when I drive to work, I drive down Dimmick Street, right on Caulfield, and drive down Pleasant Avenue.
Can we get a map of that area? I'd like to see where some of these people are live.
Sure. We have to go back to the staff presentation.
Actually, I think his had the bigger one.
I don't think it had the vicinity map,
There's
though.
this right here, kind of what shows some of the streets. Is that one you just had up a minute ago? Right here, yeah.
There you go.
So I'd first like to say I am in support of low-income housing and potentially even using this site. I think it would be wonderful if we could use it for low-income accessibility for veterans. I do have concerns, though, with the discussions of the constraints of this site. We hear that a number of times, and there have been a lot of mitigations offered to account for the numerous amount of variances requested. I think looking at the big picture, we're looking at all of these variances with regards to both articulation and modulation. But the big picture that I would like to propose is seeing whether or not this is an appropriate site for this scale of a project. As a member of this community, this is a very large-scale project in a residential community. I wonder if I understand there is a budget, and so this project can't meet all of the articulation and modulation required by the municipal code. But I don't think that there should be that we should grant the variances. I'd also highly encourage you to look at the transportation study in this area. In the original application, the entrance was on Myrtle Street. Now, if you look, the entrance is on Caulfield Street. Dimmick Street connects almost immediately after that entrance. There are 20 parking stalls in that area. In the original application, the entrance was not on Caulfield because Pleasant Avenue intersects Molalla at an angle. And as we know, Molalla is an extremely busy commercial area. Also in the rendering, it didn't show the off-site parking. There would be 11 street parking available, which was included on Caulfield Avenue. If you have walked Caulfield, it's very narrow. So for 20 cars to be entering on Caulfield, in addition to having street parking on that area, I don't think that it would encumber the community as well. So those are things that I would like to, just for you to consider. And again, the scale of the project.
How long have you lived in the area?
We just bought our house in November.
Congratulations.
And we really loved that piece of property.
I think that the property's been zoned for, it could have been commercial. So it's at least it's not commercial, it's residential.
Yeah.
So that's.
we had seen that, this is my husband.
Yeah.
And so we had seen that the county had initially purchased the property back in 2011 or 2012, and it was.
The County Soil and Water Conservation District, which is a separate
Mhm.
district. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were going to put their headquarters there and
Mhm.
have some of their demonstration stuff, but they
Yeah.
discovered that the site was too small.
Mhm. And which is, in this case as well, perhaps a smaller project would be more appropriate for this area, but a 24-unit facility with all the requested variants, I think all the requested variances are to accommodate the fact that it is too large of a facility for
What's
this
the acreage on here? Or
One.
what-
1 acre.
1 acre for 24 units, yeah. I mean,
I think it's a well-thought-out proposal and definitely a much-needed service for the community, but I think the scale for the area is too high.
Do you have something?
Chris?
no, I think I will default to my much more articulate wife on all these matters.
All right. That's probably a wise plan.
Right?
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I have, let me see, what did I just do with all these? Cindy and, what happened to the timer? Oh, you're using your phone, okay.
And that's good
Okay,
lighting.
we have Cindy and Glenda, please.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I live on 310 Myrtle. You tried to turn around my driveway, Betty.
Actually, no, I wouldn't. I backed further down. 311, I think, got me, or 12.
Yeah, I didn't turn around in your driveway, but I said, oh,
You know
that's,
better,
I,
right?
I knew where your house was, so.
Okay, so I want to first start by saying that I went around the neighborhood and let people know what was going on when the next meeting was. And then we also circulated a petition. I think you all got a copy of that. And I know that probably has no power, but I just wanted you to know that we got 50 signatures in just over a 2-day period of maybe 2 or 3 hours for 2 people running around the neighborhood. We got 50 signatures that quickly of people who absolutely do not want this project in our neighborhood. A lot of them were vets, okay? So we are not anti-veteran. We want to help vets. I mean, we came through the Vietnam area. Don't ever want to see that happen again, okay? So please don't think that any of us have a problem with veterans. We love them. We want to see this kind of work done for them. But as she said, this is too large a project. So I just want to quickly go through, the neighborhood is not a high-income neighborhood. Therefore, most of us are on fixed incomes, retirement, disability. We can't afford to just pick up because this has ruined my backyard. I can't afford to just move because I'm disabled, because I was a nurse for 40 years in this community, serving this community. So I did my part too. And I'd like to stay in my nice, quiet backyard, and it's not gonna be that anymore if I have the parking lot in my backyard. So the things people were concerned about, as you see, is that it would have an adverse economic effect on the values of our properties, the congestion of the traffic, which has been discussed quite a bit here, so I don't think we need to go over that. That whole neighborhood up in the hill above Pleasant has to converge onto Pleasant Avenue, and they already can't get on Malala Avenue. It's horror at peak traffic times for them to try to get onto Malala Avenue. They have to turn right, go all the way up to Holmes, down Lynn, just to go that direction. So this would just add more problem to that. We were worried about the negative environmental impact due to the removal of the large trees. Everybody loves the trees. Everybody loves the wildlife in the trees. There's a lot of habitat that would be destroyed along with those trees. We're glad that we're saving the heritage tree, but there are some scrub trees, that need to go, but there are also some other trees we'd like to see saved. And that was a big concern with everyone. The other thing is the flooding and high water levels. I don't know about, the rain pond and all that. I don't know how well that will work. Right now, there's a problem and does flood into neighboring properties. So I don't know if that would help or exacerbate, but we're concerned about it. And then lastly, most people feel like families with children would be far better suited to areas that have, yeah, there's one grocery store and a plaid pantry within walking distance from us. That's it. There are no parks, the schools aren't close by, and the school bus stop is between the marijuana shop and the pipe shop and the vape shop. So I'm not against those businesses if they bring business to our neighborhood. I just don't think it's the best place for children to be being, brought into the community. And lastly, I'm just gonna go along with, it's just way too big. We are all for something being built on that, but it needs to be way scaled down and fit the property. This doesn't fit the property, it ruins the property, and it kind of ruins the neighborhood, and it's not attractive. I'm sorry, I don't care how many little pots of plants and all that you put around. It isn't attractive. It looks kind of like a glorified farm building. So we hope that you decide unfavorably and don't grant the permit to build on this property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Glenda, hi again.
Hi.
Just say your name again for the
I'm
record.
Glenda Gingras. Pretty much everything I wanted to say has been addressed. The traffic, to me, is a real concern because Caulfield especially is very narrow. People already park on the street, and at most, you can get one car through at a time. I don't know where their off-street parking on Caulfield's gonna be. I missed that if it was discussed. But if it's right on Caulfield, then that narrows another block where you have one-lane traffic. It's just doesn't appear to me to be very intelligent use of the street. It did show in the diagram that there was 2 lanes on Caulfield in front of that building. But I'm not sure how they're gonna do that. There isn't 2 lanes now. They're not gonna do that with street parking. The other thing, as Cindy said, is right now you cannot get off of Pleasant onto Malala most of the time. It's very, very difficult. The other thing I believe, I'm not against building something for veterans. I understand that the builder would like to build as much as possible because that's cost effective. But for that property, I really believe that a smaller building would be much more acceptable, at least to me. That way, we could still be serving some veterans without messing up the entire neighborhood. I believe that's as much as I can remember at this minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Scott, come on down.
Hello, my name is Scott Walden. At 333 Myrtle Street. There's 2 major concerns I have. One is drainage. I've been living on Myrtle Street for 20 years. And I've been dealing with rain off this mountain for 20 years. At one time, there was 40 inches of water in my basement. Okay? There's a lot of drainage. There are springs all over this hillside. And I know of 2, one on the uphill side of Caulfield Street, which empties into this site, and then eventually empties into my basement. Okay, I have a rigid water pump, 250 gallons per minute, and when it's raining, that thing is running continuously for days. Okay, I have, everything goes there. Drainage off of the hill is a big situation, and it impacts Cindy. It impacts the house down beyond me. If my pump don't run, they flood. and just on down the hill. The next thing that I want to know about is a fence along the downhill side, along my fence line, because I have a bedroom, a bathroom right there. It's going to be open to the world. And I would not like it open to the world. If this goes in, I'm going to have to put a driveway into the backyard just to get into my backyard with a vehicle. This has impacted me in a major way. I mean, it's a little old house. It'll be 100 years old in 2025, but it's been there for a long time and it's seen a lot of use. But it's my house, and I like living there. My wife works in Multnomah County Courthouse. She can catch the bus right down there by the 333, across the street from the store, and it drops her off by the store. I like living there, but this is gonna put some real stretch on me. And I agree. I'm a veteran. I did my time. I'm all with veterans. I support them in any way I can. I know many veterans. And this site is too small for as big you want to put in there. It'll impact the whole community in a lot of different ways that we don't know of yet. And I just wish it to be changed, put it smaller, something. 24 units, that's 50 people. That's 50 new faces we got in the neighborhood. That's potential for what? We have no idea what's gonna go in there. A veteran is a veteran. But after they get back out on the streets, what are they? They're just civilians like you and me and everybody else. I want a fence and drainage if this is to be built or smaller dealt with.
But even smaller, you want a fence and drainage.
No, do what?
Even smaller, you'd still like fence and drainage.
Yes. I mean, I've got a little rat fence to keep my big dog in.
Yeah.
But it's temporary. It's not permanent.
Right.
And if they put a, on the downhill side, they've got a retaining wall going in there. Well, right under their retaining wall is my gas line. So there's a lot here that needs to be looked at.
Okay.
Have you thought of just stocking your basement? I mean, if you're getting 40 inches in your basement, have you just thought of just putting trout or bass and having your neighbors fish?
Well, I thought of, I got a canoe.
Yeah.
And actually, there was, the people that lived there before me, their basement flooded, and there was lots of water in there. And they had a canoe, the kids were down there. True story.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
we also talked about having a fence, so
Yes.
guys, come on back up. So anybody else want to testify in this before we go into rebuttal? Okay. Okay, come on up. Don't forget to fill out a slip when you get done, but that's okay.
I did fill out a slip. Excuse me.
I don't have your slip.
Judy Schaefer.
Oh, yes, because I asked you, yes.
Third person to fill out a
Yes, because I
slip.
said, okay, which pile does it go in? Okay, sorry, I skipped you because I put you in the pile for C.
That's okay. Okay, I'm Judy Schaefer, and I live at 304 Caulfield, which is at the end of that street, in the original house that was on that block. Well, not the original one. The original one is the shack that my new neighbors live in, because it was a shack when it was moved off my property and brought down there. So I live in a historical home in that neighborhood. And my biggest concern, everyone stated a lot of concerns, and I agree with the parking. It just feels like too big of a project, and it does not make any sense to me, and it makes a huge impact on my neighborhood to have 24 units and only 16 parking spots, and then expecting that residents, apartment residents, are going to have spots on the street. It is a very narrow street. Traffic, we all have to be considerate and go down one car at a time on that street. 2 cars do not pass on that street. When the garbage pickup comes, we have to be mindful when there is parking there. and stagger them so this truck can get through. So I do not understand how you can allow their parking to be on the street and to be considered that that's okay for a big residential building like that. And the other thing, my other concern is that these things are built and they're made to be for low-income people. They're made to be for veterans. I believe when I read on the site that there was going to be a counselor or on-site managing the property, living there, available to the veterans. And maybe I read that wrong. And my question always is, how long is that going to be, is that actually going to be funded and really be managed in that way and really be providing services for the veterans? Because they don't stop being veterans and they don't stop having problems just because they get a house. And I just want to know that this is going to actually really be funded and taken care of. Because behind me, before I bought my property in 1990, it was subdivided and variances were given to put in 3 low-income houses, and they were supposed to be low-income houses. And what happened is after the 5 years limitation ran out on that, they were flipped and then used as rentals, and there's no parking there. It's even narrower on that street, and it's been a continuous problem with renting to people that are dealing drugs and doing all kinds of things. And
which street is that on?
That's on La Tourette.
La Tourette, okay.
So there's, and I know because my property was divided up in the back, I have a dog leg because that's how they got around, well, we'll give the property this much, even though they built those houses all too close to my property line. So that's the past, but I have a bad taste in my mouth for seeing huge project like that go up and squeezed into a lot. And then it's not maintained and it's not kept up, and it decreases my property value. So, and I'm going to leave it at that. I have a whole list of things here, but I think people have covered them really well. Thank you.
Thanks.
So Laura, what's the right-of-way there on Caulfield? It looks like it's about a 40-foot right-of-way. I can see where the property lines are. I mean, the house at 404 and the building at 404 and the building at 403, obviously, that's the property line. And then there's more of the street that if someday, if they ever redevelop, it'll be a curb and a sidewalk, but for now it isn't.
It looks like it's more than 40 feet. I'm pulling around 43, 44, but the applicant can verify for sure.
Okay.
Certain.
All right, come on back.
I got a question for staff.
Perfect.
On that lots per unit, how many parking spaces proposed on the lot right now? 16?
20.
I think there's 20 on site.
And we got 24 units proposed. Where are the other 4 coming from? And how many required by code per unit?
So it depends on the number of bedrooms in the unit. Let me pull that section up of the staff report and let you know.
The staff report said 31 is the minimum. They have 20 in the lot, 12 on street, so they have 32 total. So they have more spots than they're required, but 12 of them are on the street. So.
And that's allowed outright. That's not a discretionary standard for.
So we allow off-street parking on public right-of-way?
I mean, on-street parking.
Yeah, this is.
We allow it outright. In other words, you can't say you can't count that. They automatically get to count it, provided they meet the size limitations of that on-street parking.
So that's credited to the site plan?
That's correct.
Okay, feel free. You've heard the public testimony, so anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the width of Caulfield. And let's see, which way do I need to go? So I agree, Caulfield is currently narrow. We are required to widen it. So right here is where the existing pavement is. And we're actually required to do half-street improvement. So we're improving half of the street to widen it, to accommodate more space for our vehicles and parking, as well as a landscape strip and sidewalks. So Caulfield will become wider to accommodate the additional parked cars there.
So what's the right of way?
The right-of-way width, I believe it's around 60 feet. It's a local street. And it's classified as a local service street, and I think that's around, somewhere around 60 feet is the right-of-way.
And you're adding a parking strip, does that take away from the 60?
No, that's included in
Or
the
is that
60.
included in the 60?
That's within the 60.
included within
So
the
right now, I
60.
think it's a 40-foot, and I can't remember what the numbers are, but basically the dedication that I had in that first slide along Caulfield is to widen the right-of-way to the standard.
So you're gonna, just ballparking, you're going to pave an additional 10 feet into your, and I'm speaking,
It's not
into
really-
your property,
not really.
and then, which is part of the right-of-way.
Right.
And in that 10 feet, people will then park, because it's roughly 8 feet for a parking space.
Right.
So your side of the road will widen to deal with your parking. The other half of the road will stay the way it is.
That's correct.
Will it be improved with curbs and sidewalks? Sidewalks I see, curbs I see.
Only on one side.
Will it be improved to the center line?
To the center line, yes.
So we got a half-street improvement.
Right, that's what, yeah,
Proposed.
that's what he just said.
Okay,
Half-street improvement.
yeah. Okay.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was size of the development. So it's actually a small development for what the site is and what it's zoned. We have 18,000 square feet of floor area. We're allowed to have 32,000 and go up to 3 stories. So, the project could become larger. It could actually be 30 to 40 units and 3 stories. We've kept it small. Feels the right size for that area, that site, and its location.
Any less number of units would make it unfeasible?
Our funding is contingent upon 24 units. So if we lose a unit, we lose the funding.
Okay.
Is this Nikolai, you mentioned that this was similar to the one that was built. I wish I'd known about that because I would have driven over to Washington County to look at the project. Would have given me a better idea. Is this the exact same project or is it different?
The design is totally different. It serves the exact same population.
Yeah, no,
And I would just add, on that note, there was a lot of concerns about parking. The population that we're serving there is similar to the one that we'll be serving here. Their car ownership is about two-thirds of the households own cars. So they actually have a lot lower car ownership. So I feel like we'll have empty spaces in the parking lot on the site.
But that's veterans in Washington County. You don't know about obviously you have no idea who's going to be moving in here, so you don't have any idea of what the parking ratio would be because I'm assuming these are for Clackamas County veterans.
It's for veterans. They don't have to
Oh, they don't
come
have to
from
be here.
Clackamas
Okay,
County
I thought I heard
necessarily.
something in the last testimony that it's going to accommodate veterans here in Clackamas County, but it's not going to have any bearing on my decision. It's just, that's what I thought I heard, so I had it in my notes.
It's also a similar sort of location in Washington County. It's on unincorporated Washington County, so it's an area that actually is less served by transit, and yet still their car ownership is pretty low. So I don't expect it to be much. I don't expect it to be dissimilar than here.
Okay. Did you have any more rebuttal?
I would just add there's a lot of concern about the trees that we have to remove, and so I asked Kevin, we are actually mitigating with 57 additional trees on top of preserving the trees that are on site. I know that they will be smaller than the trees that we are taking down, but the site will be
little 2-inch
around.
ones?
The site will be around this building will be around for at least 60 years. That's our regulatory period, and we'll likely hold it or it will likely be around for much longer, and those trees will also be growing during that time, so.
Yeah, what people get concerned about in our community is that you take down a very large caliber tree and you plant that, and
I understand.
that doesn't really, in the community's eyes, it doesn't really mitigate it. You may be planting a ton of trees, but small trees versus big trees don't. So what I guess my last question is that I'm pleased the fact that you moved the driveway, because I think putting a fence and not allowing access onto Myrtle Street, either by pedestrians or by cars, is gonna be really good for that street, since it's probably never, ever, ever gonna be brought up to any standard. But I didn't see anything in the transportation reports. The one that's in the file has not been updated, and I was looking at the site plan, and you've got a driveway, and then you've got an offset intersection, and I have some concerns about that. And I didn't see that addressed anywhere.
The revised transportation report is attached as an exhibit in the staff report.
I looked
under
at
the
it, I didn't
revised.
see that he addressed that. Did he address that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And it was
I'll-
also reviewed by our transportation
I'll look at it
engineer as
again, because
well.
I just reread it, and I didn't see anything
Are you
addressing
talking about the offset from Dimick?
Yes.
So the code requires that we're 25 feet away from the adjacent driveway, which places us more than 25 feet away from the intersection of Dimick and Caulfield. And I think there was, at some point there was thrown around that we had to be 25 feet away from Dimick and Caulfield, but we're actually more than that because we're 25 feet away from the adjacent driveway.
So we have a code standard in 1204-195, which looks at spacing standards, where it's analyzed as well.
Well, he's talking about that there aren't any new intersections. He says the proposed driveway. My concern is that while you can say whatever you want to say in the transportation reports, Oregon City's driving population is in no way can be articulated in one of these reports. And I just looked at the offset from Dimick to the offset of the driveway, and I just went, okay, yeah, I can see that. People are just very impatient in terms of drivers here.
Yeah, but how many people are gonna drive from Dimick and accidentally drive into their driveway?
No, I'm not talking about them driving into the driveway and somebody pulling out of their driveway and somebody trying to get, that's the conflict. So that's okay. That really didn't answer my question, but that's all right. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yes.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Oh, go ahead.
He has one.
Well, go ahead. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, you had mentioned something about a fence. There's nothing in the fence about the application. We know the city, or the planning commission can't condition you to build a fence because there's no nexus to any requirement to build a fence. And so can you clarify if you are building a fence in this application and where and what?
I think if it helps in this approval process, we will build a fence along Myrtle Street. And I think there's already some existing fences to the west of Myrtle Street, as well as along the property line
This
on
line
the
right
west
here is
side.
actually an existing fence, not on our property.
Where are you pointing? I can't see your plan.
Left corner.
Right up here in the
Oh, up there,
upper
okay.
northwest corner off our property, there's a fence there.
You know, like the move of the driveway from Myrtle to Caulfield, like we want to be responsive to neighborhood concerns. It's almost an occupational hazard to come out and try to convince communities that affordable housing is a real need. And everybody agrees that it's a real need, but nobody wants it in their backyard. So it's dispiriting to hear that. And but I would just open the channel up that if there are things that we can do to help make neighbors more welcoming of these veterans in their community, I would be open to talk to them about that and see what we can do to accommodate their concerns.
Okay, that sounds great.
Can we come back to your comment, Commissioner McGriff, about the requirements?
Sure.
So you had asked about the five items, and so when I wrote the variance, I tried to address each one, and I think if we could just go through those really quick. So the first one is that the variance is not likely to cause substantial damage to adjacent property, and so I think that our 2-foot articulation is not going to. I don't think that really applies. It doesn't cause damage to the adjacent property. The request is the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship. And so what I was trying to lay out there in my slides is just the depth of site that we have to work with and how much room we have to fit in the building and make that work. Our units are actually already undersized from what Oregon Housing Community Services requires, but we've worked with them to get these sizes approved. So we're already squeezed down on our sizes. Pushing 3 feet more out of the building, or squeezing a foot out basically of the units, makes those units even smaller. And so there's no definition of hardship, but where we're at on the site is we're at a limit where 2 feet pushes us up right against our public utility easement and right up against our landscaping and buffering that we need for our parking lot and having our parking lot in the back. So I think 2 feet really is the minimum that we can have there. The other one is granting the variance will equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation. So the purpose of the regulation is compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. And 2 feet, like I said, 2 feet I think it's noticeable. It's not like, it's not like 6 inches. It's not a piece of trim. It's a substantial setback from the building. And I think it's one that helps articulate the scale, helps break down the scale of the building and give it an articulation that feels residential. The last one, let's see, 2 more. Any impacts resulting from the adjustment are mitigated. So the impact, I think, of this variance is not having the extra foot of depth of the articulation. And what we're trying to do with the Italian cypress, which are definitely not arborvitae, is, reinforce that rhythm and scale that we have to the building so that it does feel residential, so it doesn't feel like a long commercial building. I think that and the landscaping help really emphasize what we do have going on with the different planes of the exterior of the building. And then no practical alternatives have been identified. Like I said, if we try to squeeze out another foot from the building, we're losing space out of units that are already small for what the standards require. So I kind of feel like we're right up against it with the 2 feet. I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's my take on it.
Well, it's a good answer. The question I have, well, you jumped in, I was going to ask a fence question, so thank you, is we have a finding, 1754-100 on fences, and it says complies, but it states that that the fence wall height cannot be higher than 3.5 feet. But this is the back of the property, so how big of a fence can they put up?
6 feet.
Good question. So the fence code allows, sorry, let me explain why there's a finding for fences when there's no fence proposed. And that's because of their retaining walls proposed, and so the fence code applies to both fences and retaining walls. And so if you were to measure from the property line on Caulfield and you were to walk towards the building, the second that you hit the building, that whole area can be no taller than 3.5 feet. Once you hit the front of the building and keep walking back towards Myrtle Street, that can be up to 6 feet. And then there's some provisions where when there's retaining walls, that the combined retaining wall plus the fence can be up to 8.5 feet in height. There was a condition of approval associated with the fence because we wanted to make sure that where the retaining wall was on the, if you're looking at the slide, the left bottom corner didn't exceed the 3.5 feet in front of the building. But generally it is 3.5 feet in front, 6 feet next to and behind, or up to 8.5 feet if there's a retaining wall involved.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that you're not stuck with a 3.5 foot fence that doesn't do anybody any good. You can build a standard cedar fence without violating things along that back line. And then you mentioned that your rain pond is double-sized, and that it is your engineering intent to decrease the amount of water that's coming off the site in its current condition. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So theoretically, if it's engineered properly and with your intent, he's not gonna be able to fish in his basement anymore.
I would get
That's
Mr.
the
Woolley's phone number and make sure you keep in touch with him.
But that's.
That's the intent, yes.
That's the
Yeah.
intent. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Are you ready to close the public hearing?
Just one more thing, actually. There was a comment about decreasing property values, and I've got an article here that I just like to enter into the record.
It's not an
It's
element
not
that we can.
it's not a criteria.
Yeah, we don't.
Okay.
we don't put that in.
Unfortunately for some
Yeah.
people,
I
but.
think you've received a request to enter something into the
Yes,
record.
you can
I
enter
think
it
you can enter it into the record.
You can enter into the record, but yeah, it's
I will
property
enter this into
values
the
is not a
record.
criteria for decision-making.
And before you guys go, mitigation to me, I mean, I like Italian cypress, unlike my friend Denise, but.
I didn't say I didn't like it.
Oh, David Hockney likes Italian cypresses in his paintings, but I don't know if that is something that you solely use for mitigation, because you can cut them down anytime. They disappear, you know. So I don't like designing buildings from the dais. I'm not a designer, I'm a planner by profession, but I've seen a lot of design review, I've done a lot of design review. And I guess the only comment that I'm asking you this question, I'm looking at the front of your building, and I don't want to sound rude, but there's no there. There needs to be more something there that defines that entrance. There needs to be something else that, I mean, I saw the two little benches.
Yeah.
But when I'm walking up to that place, and I'm walking up to the front of it, I understand that you guys have to use, bare bones in terms of your materials because you're limited, you've got a limited, budget and all that other kind of stuff. But I know that there's ways that you can be creative and come up with something.
I think what doesn't
That
show.
makes the entrance look a little bit, it looks good, I'm not saying it's terrible, but I just think that.
Well, one drawback of this rendering is
Yeah.
that it focuses all on the building and not on the site. And what doesn't show up well is the landscaping that we're putting around the entrance to
Right.
really emphasize that as the entrance. I think with that landscaping in place and the trellis, I think it's really going to be a well-emphasized entry and a focal point for the building.
It's pretty minimal. I mean, it's pretty, it
Our-
kind of, it
our-
disappears into the building.
Our entry here is about 14 feet wide, so we have a nice
Remember, we
wide.
can't see that.
I
We
like
can't,
this,
I keep reminding you, we can't see you pointing at stuff
It looks
because,
like a big entryway, and it's nice, and I like that, because it allows a lot of people to gather and that kind of thing, but it just seems like there's something missing, and what I'm trying to get at is that, the trees are good, but I think that there needs to be other pieces or other kinds of, articulation or building features that mitigate, that serve as mitigation, other than just landscape.
Are you saying it's character? Give it the house some character?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of Northwest traditional, so.
so am I.
And I think that, I think you could do more. I think you could probably make the fascia boards maybe a little thicker. Again, I don't want to design from up here, but
There's not a lot of depth to it.
yeah, there's just,
Anyway,
Yeah, but if you want to design an ugly house, you get to design an ugly house.
well, I agree,
And
but.
that's, I'm not saying it's ugly, I'm just saying.
But I think that we do have a little bit of leverage if they're asking for a variance to articulation. And I think that if you're gonna look at mitigation, I think that you have to look at meaningful architectural features that
right,
mitigate those
not,
things.
and not landscaping.
And landscaping is a start, and it's a
Yeah.
good start, and I don't wanna say that that's bad or, I like the trees, but
I get what
Can
you're
I,
saying.
can I point something out here on so our entrance is recessed 2 feet.
Yeah.
So the plane, the larger plane here is set out from the entrance. So you've got, as you enter the site, you've got the trellis, and then you've got the recess of the entry.
So you're up to 5 or 6 foot articulation at that center point?
This point is actually 4 feet right here. That this part, because this portion of the building actually steps back further. We're at 4 feet on this edge. We're at 2 feet on these sides. You can kind of see that. That doesn't show up too well here, but
It's not 2 feet on all of it.
Oh, okay. So the articulation from the end of your trellis to the main body of the building is, how far is the trellis sticking out? Is that 4, and then you get the extra 2 feet to the main part of the?
so where the trellis is more than 4 feet from the building. It's about 4.5 feet from the building is where the trellis starts.
Okay.
And then this white portion of the building right here is 4 feet out from the gray portion.
And that's a solid cover for the trellis, or is it,
It's wood slats.
it's wood slats?
Which means people are gonna get dripped on when they walk into the
Okay, so
building.
it's more decorative. Okay,
Yeah.
That's fine, but yeah, I mean, I do think that is facing south.
Might help to have some plants on it.
And that
Well,
is
it's
the
a
direction
trellis, so
of,
no.
you know.
I don't see any landscaping being proposed
It's
for
not
it.
landscape,
There
it's
is, I mean,
plants.
on a landscaping plan there is, but, gosh, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, anything else? May I close the public hearing?
Sure.
It's a little shed.
All right, the public hearing is closed, so it's available for planning commission deliberation. And we are getting close to the bewitching hour. So let's talk about this application. We have 2 applications. We have a site plan and design review, and we have an application for a variance.
Point of order?
Yes, sir.
Are we going to deliberate and be done in 6 minutes, or should we address that question first? Are we gonna stay here until after 10, which takes
I think we're in deliberations on this particular item, and we need to get done with it and then figure out what we're gonna do.
I agree. I mean, I vote for staying.
So let's get this done.
Right, but I think that takes 7 of us to
Yes,
agree to that,
gentlemen?
right?
Yep.
So should we make that agreement
That we are going to complete
tonight,
this.
that we will continue before we start deliberating for 6 minutes or 5 minutes, and then say, oh, we're out of time, and we don't,
Nothing
we
that
don't
says
know
we
where we're going.
absolutely have to be done at
Right.
10 o'clock.
That's exactly.
Okay, so everybody in favor of, oh, you go ahead, Madam Chair.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay, well,
I
who's
figure
in
once we
favor
start, we
of
always
staying till
continue.
past 10 to do the deliberations and final decision on this project?
I'm fine with it. We always do.
I will stay past 10 if we're considering a motion.
I didn't,
He said yes, he would
Yes?
stay.
No, I said I would stay if we're considering a motion, not if we're deliberating.
So we need
I
to get a
didn't hear
motion
that.
in front of
He
you.
said he would stay if we're considering a motion, but not if we're deliberating.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's get a,
Let's go.
Let's get it over and done with.
let's finish it tonight if we can.
Yep.
Finish it tonight if we can?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
right.
Okay, so I really don't think that there's enough there to approve a variance here. I mean, I understand the financial hardship, but I don't think that that's really something that you can hang your hat on to meet a variance, and you gotta meet all the criteria. I really am not excited about the design, but, I don't know. I'm really torn on this one, because neighborhood compatibility is, doesn't necessarily mean that you just look like the houses. It means that you maybe do something a cut above, and you maybe create an example for other builders. I'm definitely not in favor of the variance.
There's 3 of them.
Right, of the variances. I am marginally in favor of the project as a whole. So I move that we approve the project and deny the variances.
Well, let's take them separately. You want to make a motion to approve SP 17?
I don't think these projects can be separated.
Right.
The variance, the design that is before you is contingent on some variances.
Oh,
So I
right.
think the motion
Yeah.
is going to be for approval of a site plan with variances or a denial of a site plan with variances.
Yeah,
Right.
And I'm not comfortable with that.
okay.
Well,
Well, that's a legal opinion.
Yeah, no, that's,
I'm just telling you what my opinion is. I'm not comfortable with it.
I haven't
so,
been comfortable with this whole evening.
Yeah. Well, we know that
But
your
I'm still
chair's
here,
uncomfortable.
okay?
Yeah.
But she's given us her legal opinion, and that's what we're gonna go with.
yeah, so if we have to, if we can't separate the two, and I think that's true. I think that's correct, because it's the design's based on the requested variances, so we can't really approve something that isn't there. So, yeah, I move to deny.
And we're gonna have any more discussion, or we just,
Well, I'll second it for the purposes of discussion.
right?
Now there's discussion, and so
Can-
I'll,
Point of question, can the chair second?
Yes.
yeah.
The chair can second?
I'm not precluded from voting.
I know you
Chair
aren't,
can
but I mean,
Move and
Sure I
second.
can.
Yes.
okay, all right,
And
no offense.
That's what I said. No, I'm not taking offense. I just seconded it for the purposes of discussion.
It sounds like you are.
Yes. No, I am not offended in any way, I assure you.
Oh, shucks.
So I really want to like this project. I like what
Right.
what it's trying to do. I've convinced myself
Right.
that I'm okay with a couple of the variances. The variance with the shorter first floor and the variance with the allowing the 2-foot articulation. Like, I understand. I think what they've done addresses that. I am stuck on the maximum facade width. That's where I'm kind of leaning toward what you're saying, Paul, and I can see I need convincing on that one, and so I'd welcome it if it came from fellow commissioners, but I don't think I'm going to see that.
Well, I guess I'll jump in early.
Can we put the variances up?
I am not letting the occupants of the building make a determination about how I feel about the project. I think there's a need for residential housing.
Absolutely.
And the emotional appeals, you know, I appreciate the comments, but that does not help me in any way, and it does not bear on my decision. It's a project that's residential. I feel it needs to meet the standards. I feel that it needs to, it's going to set a precedent, and I have concerns about it because we're going to have a lot more housing come in, whether it's affordable or not, it's housing. I'm just looking at it from that standpoint. I totally agree with you, Zach. I get the requirement for the floor height. I don't have an issue with that because it is not going to be commercial in any way. I think that the vertical building modulation is a self-created difficulty. The site has constraints, but we all know these things when we buy things and we figure out whether we can do what we want to do or we can't do what we want to do. And I agree with you that it needs a little more. And while I make jokes about arborvitaes, that's just what it is. It's just my humor. I don't think that the landscaping provides enough articulation to make this building work. It's got to be on the building, not planting something that you said could be cut down, because it can be. That doesn't mean it will be, but there's always that possibility.
Well, it's 60 years.
Yeah, whatever, things can happen. I don't want to rely on plant materials to create a building articulation when it should be on the building itself. So that's my problem. And again, while I did vote to support the variance for the fire station, that was to accommodate gigantic fire trucks. It's not this. It was a completely different situation. And I don't, I support the project, but I wish there had been more done with the building. Again, I don't think landscaping is a substitute for doing something else. I think you're right. Something else could have been done with it.
I think so.
So I support the project. I would approve the project. I don't support the 3 variances. I support 2 of them, but not the 3rd one, because I don't think they met the criteria.
So in a sense, you're saying,
Of the 3 variances, I think the first one was talking about lowering the height of the building, or lowering
No,
the
that's the
first
that's
floor.
the 3rd one.
Third one, whichever.
Yeah, that's.
Helps the massing articulation of, we brought the thing down by X number of feet to help it fit into the neighborhood a little bit better. And that one's not seeming to be the main objection from what I think I've heard here on articulate, or variances. That variance helps
That had to do with
offset some of the
commercial,
height.
that had to do with commercial. That's why the standard was in there, because this is an MUC zone.
But it's there.
Yes, but it has to do with the fact that it's not going to be a commercial occupancy with a floor ratio height, not to bring it down to be compatible with the neighborhood. That's not what that
Could I ask
standard
a
is.
question then?
Sure.
Does it help the massing fit into this residential neighborhood?
I can't,
It's brought the height of the building down closer to the existing neighborhood.
So my answer to you is that being very familiar with that neighborhood, because my best friend used to live there, and I've gone there many, many times, it's hard for me to tell because there wasn't an example of how the building and the surrounding neighborhood look to each other. So,
My
so I
question-
can't answer that question
Okay.
for you, so no,
But
I don't think
My question
so.
wasn't really, does it solve the problem, but does it help the problem?
I don't
the
think so.
issue?
I can't tell if it
Well,
does or
it's
not.
lowering the, I don't know the exact amount that it lowered the roof of the building by getting rid of the 13-foot elevation.
Yeah, I can't tell.
It's gotta be 3-4 feet.
Because I can't see how that relates to the other buildings.
Well, with that, I would say I'm leaning towards the approval of it. There's issues around it, but I don't see any of them
It's real close.
being
It's close.
significant enough to say deny.
I don't want us to deny this, because I think they're almost almost there, but they're not quite. I agree with the statements that have been made, but I would prefer that we continue this and ask the applicant to come back with a modified site plan addressing the issues that we've just discussed, and bring that back with some changes, and then make the motion based on those changes, make our decision based on those changes, if they do decide to make or no, to whether or not we're going to approve the application. But I think that
Have to
they
reopen
can,
the public
I think that they can get to the point where we'll approve it. My concern is I'm not concerned about the traffic issue. You're not going to solve that traffic issue with this use or another use or any other use down the road if we deny this one. That configuration of street alignment is there for good. The solution to traffic control is going to be in the future. The changes that they might come back with, based on our comments here, might just prove to be compatible with the neighborhood. And I think a continuance and a modification of the site plan based on our comments might be the thing to make this.
Well, procedurally, we'd have to reopen the public hearing because you gave me permission to close it.
So what?
Well, no, I'm just saying,
That's
I got
fine.
no, I
That's
got
fine
no
with me.
problem. I like your solution.
Well, my problem here is let's solve a problem. We should be problem solvers here. I mean, let's not create one, let's solve it. For both parties. Now, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. The neighborhood has to understand that this piece of property is gonna develop. And it could develop far worse than the one that's being proposed now. Now, if we all work together and put our thinking hats on, I think we can solve this. Not ideally, because it's not gonna be an ideal situation, but let's do something.
I can withdraw.
I think we owe it to the community. I think we owe it to ourselves. Let's not make a problem out of something that may or may not exist. That's the end of my pontification.
Okay, I think Commissioner Mahoney's comments make a lot of sense, and I'd like to withdraw my motion at this point and
I'll withdraw the second.
then ask the chair if she can reopen the public hearing and hear from the applicants if they were willing to come back and with an alternative designs that.
Could we do with a nod from from the applicant?
I don't know that we need to ask the applicant for permission to continue. We've got 120 days till
June 14th?
June 14th, so I think we've got plenty of time, and I think we'd be looking at a continuance to,
April 23rd?
if the applicant felt that that would be enough time. I believe that they do feel that it's enough time, so I think
right.
that's,
I think
Well, I don't see anybody nodding.
Oh, I was nodding.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm looking over here. Okay, well, let me, the motion has been withdrawn.
Yeah, but deliberations still aren't over.
Yeah, the Navy's gonna say something here. It's gonna screw up the Marine Corps. Go ahead.
I think he just dissed you.
As the senior service to the Marine Corps, that's our job. So, I got, first off, I don't think anybody has an issue with the 13-foot, so, or that variant, so don't make that part of your factor if this is a comeback. But, you know, I was looking at their actual plan, and the whole issue about 2 feet versus 3 feet. There are some parts of the building that go 4 feet, some parts that go 3. There's only 4 places where they only go 2 feet. So it isn't the entire building that needs, you know, the 2 feet variation. There's elements of the design, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a weird shaped lot. It's not a square thing. So, you know, and those 4 feet are on the ends. So the 2 feet are happening in the middle of the facade. And my understanding of the purpose of all the articulation modulation is to not have a slab-faced building.
That's about what we got.
And so you do have some articulation happening. You have some excessive articulation if you put what I believe is more of a pergola than
Can you put the building
trellis,
back on?
but, so,
Christina, can you put the building back on?
so,
Vote.
Which one, do you want the rendering one or the elevations?
The rendering one.
So it's basically this center column that's got the 2 foot, and everything else is between 3 and 4, depending on which side you are on it. And it's the same on the other side. I mean, it's a consistent thing. And so from that aspect of it, and I'm willing to put a couple bucks down that they designed the building with as minimal an impact on variances as possible, because they didn't want to ask for 7. And they've been talking with Laura and her staff, and they've designed the building as least variable as possible. And so saying, yeah, no, come on back. You can find an extra, 12 inches here, or, I think that is, to a certain extent, a waste of time. The other side of it is, because they're a nonprofit, they don't have time. This isn't a for-profit thing. But the other side of it comes back to, well, but what if it's a development at 5th and Ganong, and it's a for-profit 48 unit apartment building? Would the same, it's okay, if they're only 2 feet versus 3 feet, blanket thing occur? So, it's got to be good for the goose and the gander. But I don't think, I think the spirit and the intent of the articulation is being met. There are ins and outs. It isn't a slab. There's paneling changes. There's lines of changes. And I don't, to me, the biggest issue is the one thing that Commissioner Mahoney said is how do people get off of Pleasant and into the city? But we have a traffic engineer study who says, yeah, it sucks, but it can be done. And it's going to happen no matter what. I mean, a lumber yard could go in there.
I don't think that's allowed in the MUC.
As long as they let people live on top of the lumber yard, they could.
Mixed-use development with a lumberyard?
Yeah, it's a commercial development on the bottom, and they sell lumber, and so you could have forklifts with their nice little backing horns going off.
Okay.
So anyway, I don't think that there's enough in this, of concern in this for me to deny it. I think the variances are reasonable and that they've done a lot of work in order to meet the spirit and intent of those particular things. So I'm prepared to vote on this item tonight.
Would you be prepared to make a motion along those lines with conditions?
Which conditions?
Well, that condition of protecting these people from nighttime lighting as those cars spray the driveway with.
Well, they've already stepped forward that they're willing to put up a fence, but, and I don't know if we can make that a condition.
We can't.
Why not?
There's no criteria that you
Yeah.
could have a
But
nexus
how
for
about a
condition.
suggestion?
But they've already proposed it.
Yeah, they've
So-
already proposed it, so I'm willing to accept that. And so, you know,
You know, for a group of people that aren't architects, and this application doesn't come before us as an architectural review board, we sure act like it.
yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I think the spirit and intent are being met, and the variances are reasonable based upon their design.
If you make that motion, I'll second it.
Like Paul said, I've done enough design reviews to know what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
Over
yeah,
the
I know
years.
that, but we don't
Yeah.
have the authority, is what I'm
Yeah,
getting at.
well, but we do. We have this application in front of us. That is our authority.
For
Site plan and design review. They've asked for site plan and design review. That gives us the authority to do it.
Well, excuse me.
Yes, well, I will not excuse you because you don't need any excuses. You're a planner too.
Oh,
You've done
yeah.
site plan and
Yeah,
design
I
review.
should know, yeah.
So I like Mr. Mahoney's suggestion. So I don't know if there's a motion to that. You want to make a motion some other way? I concur with your comments.
To continue it?
Yes.
Or
to.
Well, let's just do it easy. We'll start with mine. I move approval.
He was
No,
first.
I want Damon to do this. He's more articulate.
Oh, please,
I
don't
move
sell
approval of
yourself short.
SP 170119 and VR 17001 with conditions as stated in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
Yes,
I second it.
He seconded it.
Let's just
Commissioner
start
Gile?
at the top.
I passed for a minute, I'm still deciding.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
No.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Chairperson McGriff?
You forgot Commissioner Guile.
you left me out again.
And
Well,
Mr.
you're-
Johnson.
Sorry, you're at that. Apologies. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Chairperson McGriff?
Forgot Commissioner Guile.
I'm gonna come back to, because you're chair. Commissioner Guile?
I didn't even get to make a
Please make-
conversation during the deliberation.
Please
You didn't
make a
call me.
comment.
I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference, the way this vote is looking, so I'm gonna vote aye.
Okay, Chairperson McGriff?
No. And again, that's not because I don't support the project. You heard what my concerns were. I was willing to continue to come back for design. Again, I feel this is gonna set a precedent and I feel really bad about it.
So the results are,
The results
approves.
as 4-2, motion carries. Or 5-2, motion carries.
okay,
Guess I should have said.
go build a nice house and be good to the neighbors.
So I would like to move item 3D as continued.
3D.
3D.
D, yes. Like
D as in
3D,
dog.
like 3D. Yeah. To April the 9th.
This may,
No, April 9th is gonna be
this may
busy.
be a
Annexation of Park Place.
Well, somebody else gets bumped. These guys have priority.
Park Place is not gonna be bumped, you got that information, it's been bumped 3 times.
No, the neighbors will.
Oh, that's not my problem.
Sorry, are you guys looking for a date to continue
Yes,
the
I'm
last item
suggesting
too?
April the 9th.
I would suggest April the 18th, please.
Can't guarantee
I
it.
move that we continue AN 1705, ZC 1706, and TP 1709 to April 18th.
Second.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I retract that date. That was our city commission date if we move forward.
Yeah, that's not, I was gonna say, that's
One
not.
moment.
that's the
The
wrong-
23rd would be the next one, you already used
My
that date.
apologies.
The neighbors will appeal to the
April 23rd.
So why can't we do this on the 9th?
decision.
It's gonna be a busy night.
It's gonna, you can do it on the 9th. We also have 2 other items on the 9th. We have a large zone change as well as a code interpretation, and it's those first, the major hearings for that.
A zone change, on April 9th, don't you have the annexation of 92 acres? You said zone change and,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We have 2
That's
items.
gonna
That's
This
one of
would-
them.
This would come on before those.
Not again. The last time you guys did that, people were out in the audience.
Whatever the will of the
Tom,
commission is.
could you just
We pushed people
let
away
her finish,
by putting
please?
it ahead.
Tom, could you let Laura finish, please?
You were the one who said put it ahead.
We have sufficient time in the 120 to kick it to April 23rd rather than April 9th, if we're concerned of April 9th becoming too large of a hearing.
It's gonna be large.
I'd like to move we continue it to the 23rd.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Commissioner Guile,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahoney,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Chairperson McGrath.
No.
Motion carries.
Okay. Communications?
No
Approval of
well, just the communication, we do have approval of minutes. For my only communication, it's just a note that we got the SEI, the annual reporting of income for each of you guys to fill out and to submit.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm working on mine
I
right
did mine the day.
even as we speak.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
They'll find
forgot
it.
about that.
Yes, they will.
That's it.
Okay, so we have the approval of the minutes of February the 13th, 2017. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Aye, second, I mean.
Any changes on it? So let's do them all in one lump. Anybody have any changes, suggestions on the minutes of February 27th, 2017?
Move approval.
I'll second. And how about the minutes of March 13th, 2017?
Move approval.
Has everybody read them?
I did.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we'll take them all together. Looks like we all don't have any comments or changes. So on the motion to approve all three of the minutes as specified, February 13th, February 27th, and March 13th. On the motion, do the roll call, please.
Do we have a second? Oh, we seconded.
Yes, it was seconded
Commissioner
several
Guile?
times.
Commissioner Guile,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahoney,
Aye.
Chairperson McGrath.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, is there any communications from the commission? Jack's got his hat on, he's ready to go. All right, meeting is adjourned.
All right.